What allows a single house to endure when its age, its fortunes, and its world have vanished into memory, leaving only quiet stone standing against time's patient and unbroken passage? Welcome to Historic Docs Archive, dear listener. Share where you are joining from tonight and when you began listening. If you enjoy these histories, consider subscribing before our journey begins. The night settles gently over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the great house stands in a quiet hush that seems older than the forests around it. The air is cool, the hills are dark, and only a few faint lights glow behind narrow windows of carved stone. In this soft stillness, Biltmore appears not as a tourist landmark or a symbol of the Gilded Age, but as a solitary presence watching over the land, as it has for more than 130 years. There are places in this world that feel as though they are waiting, holding stories that cannot be hurried, and Biltmore is one of them. Its long facade stretches across the ridge, its towers rising against the night sky, each stone cut and set during an age of astonishing ambition. Yet in this moment the house is quiet, as if it is listening to the wind that moves through the bare branches and down the long approach road. The sound is gentle, hardly more than a breath, but it carries a suggestion of the countless seasons the house has witnessed, the summers heavy with heat, the autumns bright with color, the winters when snow drifted against the courtyard walls. The house stands unchanged in silhouette, though everything around it has transformed again and again. For most listeners, it may seem almost impossible that a single private residence could endure across so many decades. The United States is a land where fortunes rise quickly and disappear just as fast. Cities change their outlines every generation. Grand homes built with enormous confidence often stand for only a short time before being sold, divided, or demolished to make way for something newer, something more practical, or something simply different. When we look at Biltmore today, we are seeing the rare exception, not a stone shell left behind after a vanished fortune, but a living estate that still breathes, still functions, and still carries the purpose its first owner imagined. Most Gilded Age mansions have not been so lucky. Their stories are usually brief, brilliant, and then abruptly ended. Yet here in the quiet mountains of North Carolina, this house remains intact, with its rooms preserved and its grounds tended, as though the age that built it never entirely ended. This contradiction is the doorway into our story. It is fitting to begin here, in the present, in the soft darkness of an evening that mirrors the hush of memory. Looking at Biltmore from a distance, the scale is hard to absorb at once. The front of the house stretches so far across the ridge that the eye moves slowly from tower to tower, trying to understand the full shape of what it sees. From the ground, the roof seems impossibly high, with steep pitches, carved dormers and chimneys that rise like watchful sentinels. Though architectural details may be mentioned later, tonight it is the atmosphere, not the measurements, that matters. There is a stillness over everything, a calm that settles on the stones, on the quiet lawns, and on the distant trees. A single light near the entrance flickers faintly, as though someone inside has stepped into a hallway and then gone on again, leaving only a trace of movement behind. For listeners drifting into the story at the end of a long day, this moment is meant to be gentle. There is no need to rush. Let the pace slow, let the world become quieter, and let the shape of the house settle into your imagination. Picture the towers in silhouette, the roof line softened by the pale glow of the moon, and the long shadows stretching across the grounds. Imagine the air carrying the faint smell of damp earth and pine, the kind of scent that belongs to mountain evenings. The house has stood here through countless nights like this, through storms and calm, through years of celebration and years of hardship, through the seasons of a single family's triumphs and struggles. This is the place George Washington Vanderbilt II imagined into existence, the place he believed could combine beauty, knowledge, and a harmonious relationship with the land. Yet we will not step into his life just yet. Before we move backward in time, stay with the present a little longer. Let the image of the house remain steady. Feel the sense of height, of quiet grandeur, of a building so large that even its shadows seem to have weight. Think of the many lives that have passed through its doors, the generations of workers who cared for it, the thousands upon thousands of visitors who have walked along its paths, and the quiet moments when it stood entirely alone, with only the mountains keeping watch. Now draw a little closer. Imagine yourself walking along the gravel path that leads toward the great entrance. The path curves gently and the crunch of footsteps is softened by the night air. Above you, the carved stone arches rise higher with each step. The house seems to lean forward almost imperceptibly, not in a threatening way, but as though it is acknowledging your presence, aware that someone has come to listen to its story once more. The windows near the entrance reflect the dim light from the path and reveal nothing of the rooms beyond. The heavy doors are closed, but beyond them lie spaces that once astonished even the wealthiest of guests. Tonight those rooms are empty and silent. The fireplace is dark, the books resting undisturbed in their shelves. Yet even in silence, the rooms seem alive with memory. As you pause at the foot of the grand entrance steps, imagine the sound of your breath in the cold air, a slow inhalation and a slow exhalation. The quiet around you is deep enough that each breath feels noticeable. For older listeners especially, this calm is intentional. The pacing of this story invites reflection rather than urgency. Just as a historian moves slowly through archival pages, we move slowly here, allowing each image to settle before continuing. There is a sense that the house itself requires such pacing, that a place of this magnitude cannot be rushed through or reduced to quick impressions. While you stand there, consider how unlikely this house's survival truly is. Built during a time of enormous optimism and staggering fortunes, it could easily have succumbed to the same forces that swept away so many other grand homes. Economic upheavals, wars, shifting tastes, and the heavy burden of maintenance have erased countless estates that were once celebrated. Yet Biltmore continues, year after year, adapting yet remaining true to its original presence. The reason for this endurance is not simple. It lies in the life of the man who built it, in the determination of the woman who protected it, in the decisions made by later generations, and in a delicate balance between preservation and change. Before we begin telling that long and intricate journey, let yourself picture the house one last time from this vantage point. The sky above it is clear, perhaps with a few thin clouds drifting slowly across the stars. The ridge below it slopes gently downward into darkness, where the land is lost to shadow. The stone of the facade feels almost warm in its soft tone, though the night air is cool. A light wind moves past, carrying a faint echo of distant waterfalls or streams hidden in the forest beyond. Everything is still, yet everything holds the memory of movement, of lives lived, of choices made in the past that shaped the present moment. The story will soon lead us inside and then far back into the 19th century, to the origins of a fortune, to a quiet young man who found comfort in books, and to an idea that took shape across oceans and continents. But for now, stay with this quiet image of the house standing alone at night, an immense silhouette against the mountain sky, its windows dim, its grounds empty, its presence steady. The night air deepens slightly, and the outlines of the towers seem softer, as though the house is withdrawing gently into the darkness, waiting for its past to be told. The faint glow from those few windows lingers in the mind as we move backward through time, as though the light itself contains a memory waiting to surface. In the present, the house stands quietly against the night, but in the past, it rose within a very different world, a world shaped by iron rails, steam whistles, and a rapidly growing nation that believed almost anything was possible if one had enough will, enough ambition, and enough money. As we let that image of the dimly lit facade fade, Another scene begins to form, much louder and far more energetic, far from the calm mountains of North Carolina. It is the world in which the Vanderbilt fortune was born, a world that laid the foundation for the house that would one day stand on that distant ridge. In the early decades of the 19th century, long before Biltmore existed anywhere but in the imagination of a future heir, Cornelius Vanderbilt began to shape a fortune that would define an era. He was a man of relentless drive, known for his work with steamships and railroads, for his sharp dealings, and for the speed with which he turned every opportunity into profit. New York, where he lived and worked, was a city of constant noise. The clang of metal, the calls of dock workers, the steady churn of machinery, and the movement of ships in the harbor. The streets were crowded, the air thick with smoke and dust. It was an environment of competition more than contemplation, of bold action rather than quiet reflection. Through these restless currents, Cornelius Vanderbilt built a financial empire so vast that it became a symbol of American industrial power. From this world of hard ambition and ceaseless competition came a second generation, one that expanded the fortune even further. The Vanderbilt name became associated with railroads that stretched across the country, with grand mansions along Fifth Avenue, and with a level of wealth almost unimaginable at the time. This was the height of the Gilded Age, when opulence and display were not unusual but expected among the richest families. Their houses grew larger, their gatherings more elaborate, and their social circles more exclusive. In many ways, the spirit of the era pushed these families toward greater and greater shows of success, as though each new home must outshine the last. Yet at the center of this restless social world, one young man stood apart, less dazzled by power than by knowledge. George Washington Vanderbilt II was born into this immense fortune in 1862, arriving as the youngest of 8 children. For most of his relatives, wealth seemed a tool for expansion, for influence, for commanding attention in the social and business circles of New York. But George grew up differently. Even as a child, he was drawn to quiet corners and long hours with books. While his older brothers took an interest in the machinery of commerce, he immersed himself in literature, languages, history, and art. He spent more time in study than in society, more time listening than speaking. In the midst of a family known for energy and ambition, he became known for contemplation and reserve. Imagine him again as a young man, perhaps standing at a tall window in one of the Fifth Avenue mansions, the noise of the city far below. The streets are filled with horses and carriages, tradesmen calling out their wares, and a constant flow of pedestrians. Yet inside the library, where George prefers to be, the world is quieter. Rows of books line the walls, their leather spines neatly arranged. Light falls through the window onto a reading table, where volumes of European literature lie open beside maps and sketches. George reads not only to pass the time, but to understand the cultures and histories of distant places. He studies languages with a seriousness uncommon among his peers, mastering French, German, and Italian, and exploring Greek texts with patience and curiosity. Where others might see leisure and travel, George sees education. As he grows older, he begins to spend months at a time abroad, walking through European cities and visiting museums, private estates, and architectural landmarks. In France, he sees the long riverside chateau that once housed nobles and kings. In England, he observes the great landed estates where agriculture, forestry, and social life form a single complex system. In Italy, he studies villas surrounded by terraced gardens and landscapes designed with mathematical precision. He moves slowly through these spaces, noting not only their beauty but their purpose, their structure, and the way they integrate human design with the natural environment. During these travels, the vision that will eventually shape Biltmore begins quietly to take form. It is not yet a plan or a blueprint, but an idea that grows in depth each year. He imagines a home that is not only large, not only filled with art and books, but designed with intention and harmony. He envisions an estate that functions as a living organism, where forests are carefully managed, where gardens thrive, where the best of European tradition meets the innovations of the American century. His dream is not born of social competition, but of personal aspiration, a desire to create something lasting, something that reflects a cultivated mind rather than a desire for display. It is important to pause here, to let the contrast settle. George's vision forms in the midst of noise and movement in a family known for its large gestures, yet his imagination turns toward quiet landscapes and intellectual pursuits. The environment of his youth stands in stark contrast to the mountain ridge where his house would one day rise. But this contrast helps reveal the nature of the man behind the estate. He was not trying to surpass his siblings or impress society. He was seeking a home that matched his inner world, a place where he could gather the books he loved, surround himself with art, nurture the land, and invite thoughtful conversation. As he travels, the idea gains clarity. He becomes more certain about what he wants, though he does not yet know where it will be built. The house he imagines requires land, open space, fresh air, and a landscape that can be shaped and restored. Europe provides inspiration, but not a home. The United States offers the opportunity for innovation, for creating something new, something not bound by the strict expectations of European tradition. George carries these thoughts with him as he moves from country to country, visiting libraries, galleries, and estates. Each experience adds a fragment to the vision. Now imagine him returning home from one of these long journeys, stepping out of a carriage onto the stone pavement of Fifth Avenue. The mansion is grand with tall windows and ornate detailing, but inside he does not find the quiet expanses or the harmony with nature that he came to love abroad. The city is dense, filled with noise and activity, and though he appreciates the comforts of home, he feels the absence of something he cannot ignore. The seed of his future house has already taken root in his thoughts. It will not be built here, in the center of power and society, but somewhere far more peaceful, where the air moves cleanly through the trees and the landscape stretches open before him. Before we follow him to that place, pause with the image of George standing inside the family library, looking out at a city of brick, stone, and endless motion. His world is comfortable, but his mind is already turning towards something different, something distant, something that will eventually rise in the silence of the mountains. The faint lights in the windows we saw at the beginning of our story come from that imagined place. Soon we will follow him toward it. The quiet image of George in that city library lingers like a held breath, his gaze fixed not on the bustling streets below, but on a horizon that did not yet exist for him. It is from that stillness, from that sense of inward turning, that the next movement in his life begins. The window, the noise of New York, the weight of inherited fortune, all fade as another landscape appears in his path, one that seems almost the opposite of everything he has known. It begins not with grandeur, but with air. Clean air, moving gently over mountain ridges, carrying scents of pine and distant streams. George, who had spent so much time in Europe studying cultivated estates, first encountered this air on a visit made for a very practical reason: his mother's health. In the late 1880s, Asheville, North Carolina was becoming known for its climate. Doctors recommended it for patients suffering from respiratory conditions, believing the mountain air beneficial. Families from across the country traveled there seeking relief, and the region developed a modest reputation as a health retreat. When Maria Vanderbilt required rest, the family journeyed south, expecting little more than a period of quiet recovery. Yet for George, the visit would alter the course of his life. Imagine him stepping off the train, the air noticeably cooler, the mountains rising in layers of blue and gray around him. The ridges seem endless, each one fading into the next as though the landscape stretches without boundary. Compared to the dense streets of Manhattan or the gilded drawing rooms of Newport, this place feels young, raw, and ancient all at once. The Asheville of that era was small, with unpaved roads, modest homes, and a tiny but growing community. The surrounding countryside bore the marks of long use. Much of the land had been logged heavily, leaving hillsides exposed and forests diminished. Farms struggled with thin soil after years of poor agricultural practices. Travelers often described the area as picturesque from a distance, but worn and exhausted upon closer inspection. Yet George saw something different in that landscape. Where others noted depletion, he noticed possibility. Where others saw land stripped of its timber, he saw room for renewal. As he moved through the hills and valleys around Asheville, perhaps on horseback or by carriage, the views opened before him in wide, sweeping arcs. The mountains did not rise sharply like those in Europe. Instead, they unfolded gently, ridge after ridge, creating a sense of infinite space. One afternoon, standing on a high ridge overlooking the French Broad River, George paused for a long time. The land below him was quiet, the river moving steadily through the valley. The hillsides around him were patched with open fields and clusters of surviving trees. Though the land was far from pristine, its potential was unmistakable. Something in that view resonated with the idea that had been forming in his mind for years. This was not Europe. This was not a cultivated estate polished by centuries of labor. But the bones were here. The shape of the land, the climate, the scale, the distance from city noise, all these elements created a harmony he had not found elsewhere in America. Consider the contrast again. A man raised among iron rails and steam engines, accustomed to towering facades and constant voices, now stood in a place where the only sound was wind through sparse branches and the slow rhythm of water. The difference must have struck him immediately. Perhaps he understood at once that this was the place he had been seeking. Or perhaps the idea grew slowly over the course of several visits, each one deepening his sense that something extraordinary could be created here. What we do know is that his imagination took hold of the land in a way it never had elsewhere. The ridges became the frame of a future view. The river became a line of continuity. The worn soil became an opportunity for restoration rather than a limitation. The emptiness became a canvas. George began to purchase land quietly and steadily. He approached farmers and landowners with respect, offering fair prices rather than exploiting their circumstances. In a time when wealthy buyers often imposed their will on local communities, his fairness surprised many. Parcels were acquired one by one, forming an ever-expanding estate that soon stretched farther than anyone realized. As months passed, the acreage grew until it encompassed an area larger than many small towns. Eventually, the total reached 125,000 acres. To appreciate the scale, imagine not a house or a garden, but an entire landscape: hills, fields, forests, rivers, and distant peaks. This was not a simple purchase. It was the foundation of a living estate that would require decades of work to shape. During these early years, George's interest focused not only on the land itself, but on the possibility of bringing it back to health. The forests that had once covered these mountains had been heavily logged, and what remained was thin and scattered. He recognized that any estate he built would need to begin with restoration. To reshape the land, he needed expertise. And so, with characteristic thoughtfulness, he sought out the young forester Gifford Pinchot, one of the few Americans who had studied modern forestry practices in Europe. Pinchot shared George's vision for sustainable management, and together they began planning the replanting of trees, the stabilization of slopes, and the introduction of scientific methods for future growth. Imagine the land during this period of transition. Hillsides once bare began to show signs of new life. Seedlings were planted in rows, forming the outlines of forests that would one day stand tall. Streams that had eroded their banks through decades of misuse were stabilized. Pastures were reorganized. simple farm buildings appeared, signaling that the estate was not intended as a showpiece, but as a functioning, working landscape. There is a quiet dignity in this phase, a steady effort that would remain largely invisible to future visitors who saw only the finished result. To George, it was essential. The land would breathe again. As his plans for the estate grew clearer, the question of the house itself became unavoidable. He had found the location, he had acquired the land, he had begun restoration. Now he needed a home to match the landscape. The view from the ridge where he first felt the clarity of his vision would become the setting for his future house. But building such a house required an architect capable of understanding both European tradition and American potential. The name that emerged was Richard Morris Hunt, one of the most respected architects of the period, and a man who had trained at the prestigious academies of Paris. Before we follow the first conversations between George and Hunt, pause again with the image of the ridge. Picture George standing there as the light shifts across the hills, the river gleaming in the valley below. The air is still. The land is waiting. The vision he carries in his mind will soon take shape in stone, wood, and glass. But for now, it remains suspended in that moment, held between what is and what will be. The ridge remains in view, its quiet outline holding the place where George once stood, imagining a house that did not yet exist. The land waits in stillness, but the work ahead will soon be set in motion by a meeting between two men who understood beauty in different but complementary ways. One was a scholar who collected ideas as others collected possessions. The other was an architect who shaped vision into form with discipline and precision. From that single ridgeline, the next chapter begins to unfold as George turns toward the man who could translate imagination into stone. Richard Morris Hunt had already secured a distinguished place in American architecture by the time George approached him. He had designed public buildings, private mansions, and monumental works, and was known for balancing technical demands with aesthetic ideals. Hunt carried with him the training he had received in Europe, and his designs often reflected the influence of classical and Renaissance forms, yet he also understood the practical realities of construction in a young nation, still developing its own architectural language. When he first heard George describe his desire for a French Renaissance chateau in the mountains of North Carolina, he likely recognized both the ambition and the difficulty of such a project. Their early conversations were marked by a deliberate calm. George spoke not with the urgency of a man seeking status, but with measured thought, explaining the places he had studied in France, the chateau whose forms had inspired him, and the feeling he hoped to create. Hunt listened carefully, noting details, understanding the scale of the vision. He traveled to North Carolina to see the land for himself, walking the ridge where the house would stand. From that height, he could take in the expanse of the distant mountains, the valley below, and the turning of the river. The location was remote, but it offered something rare, grandeur set within openness, allowing the house to appear not imposed, but placed with purpose. Hunt began to sketch. The lines emerged slowly at first, shaped by the landscape, then strengthened by the architectural language George admired. The steeply pitched roofs resembled those of the chateaux at Blois and Chambord. The towers, turrets, and stonework echoed forms from the Loire Valley. Yet Hunt was careful to ensure that the design was not a replica. American materials, American scale, and American innovation would be essential. The challenge was to create a home that honored European tradition while functioning in a new environment, far from the formal avenues and manicured gardens of France. As the sketches developed, so did the complexity of the decisions. The materials needed to be sourced from distant locations. The limestone would come from Indiana, requiring transport by rail. The structural framework had to support the weight of massive walls, intricate stone detailing, and steep roofs. Unlike the flat plains of the Midwest or the coastal cities of the Northeast, the mountains posed their own problems. Roads were limited, and the terrain required careful engineering simply to establish a foundation. Yet in Hunt's mind, these difficulties were not obstacles, but elements of the challenge he accepted. George followed every stage of the design process closely. He traveled regularly to meet with Hunt, reviewing models and drawings, offering thoughtful comments, always prioritizing quality and authenticity. Their partnership grew out of shared respect. George valued Hunt's expertise, and Hunt valued George's clarity of purpose. There was no indication of haste in their exchanges. Instead, there was a sense of building slowly, intentionally, as though each decision was part of a larger composition. When the design reached its completed form, it stood as a testament to this collaboration. The house stretched outward and upward, appearing both solid and graceful. The central block of the structure was long and symmetrical, with towers rising at calculated intervals. Tall chimneys and ornate dormers punctuated the roofline. The entrance, framed by carved stone, opened toward the distant mountains. Windows were placed to capture natural light, while interior spaces were arranged to guide movement gently from one room to the next. Hunt's design brought together art, engineering, and landscape in a way few American homes had yet attempted. With the design finalized, attention turned to the daunting task of construction. The first step was to prepare the site. Workers cleared the ridge and leveled the ground, marking out the footprint of the new house. Roads were improved to allow heavy materials to be transported up the mountain. A temporary village for workers was established nearby, complete with housing, food supplies, and tools. Engineers surveyed the land repeatedly to ensure stability. The scale of the project became evident as materials began to arrive. Stone blocks, timber, ironwork, and equipment accumulated, forming a landscape of labor that contrasted sharply with the natural surroundings. The number of workers increased rapidly. Stonecutters, carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, and laborers each played a role in shaping the structure. Many came from local communities, while others traveled from Europe, bringing specialized skills. Italian craftsmen arrived to carve stone with techniques passed down through generations. French artisans contributed their knowledge of plasterwork. English woodworkers were enlisted for paneled rooms that required precision and experience. The estate became a gathering place for expertise from around the world, all brought to the mountains of North Carolina by a single vision. The rhythm of construction was steady and demanding. Tools struck stone, saws cut timber, and scaffolding rose higher each season. Workers labored through summer heat and winter cold. Progress was slow at times, hindered by weather or shortages of materials. Yet the house continued to grow. Walls rose, floors were framed, and roofs were assembled. Decorative elements were crafted and installed with care. The details, carved cornices, patterned tiles, framed windows, were executed with precision, reflecting George's insistence on quality. Throughout this period, George visited the site often. He walked among the workers, observing progress, asking questions, and studying the unfolding structure. He watched as the rooms he had envisioned began to take shape, as staircases rose through the house, as the great hall extended toward its full height. The landscape around the construction site began to respond to the changes as well. Trees planted earlier in the forestry project grew taller. The outlines of future gardens became visible. Fields were shaped and pathways traced across the land. The estate was developing as a unified whole. Eventually, the exterior neared completion, standing solid against the sky. From a distance, the house appeared as though it had always belonged to the ridge, its towers rising in harmony with the slopes behind them. Up close, its scale became unmistakable. The stonework carried the marks of human hands, each piece placed deliberately. The house was both grand and grounded, monumental and personal. Inside, work continued as craftsmen fitted wood panels, laid tile floors, installed fireplaces, and prepared spaces for the furnishings and collections that would one day fill them. The house remained quiet in these early stages, its corridors empty, its rooms unfinished, the scent of fresh wood and stone filling the air. This silence would not last. Soon other sounds would take its place. the footsteps of guests, the hum of daily life, the soft echo of music. But before that could happen, the interior needed to be completed, and each room carried its own demands. The Great Hall required structural reinforcement disguised as medieval timbering. The library needed custom shelving for thousands of books. The winter garden awaited its glass ceiling to capture sunlight. And so, the work continued, room by room, detail by detail, all moving toward a moment of completion that still lay years in the future. As the final stones were set and the last scaffolds began to come down, a sense of anticipation settled over the estate. The house now stood ready for its next chapter. The exterior was complete, the interior nearly so, and the surrounding land had begun to respond to George's careful restoration. All that remained was the moment when the doors would open for the first time, revealing the spaces within. And on the eve of that moment, the estate grew still again, as though waiting for its first breath as a completed home. The stillness that settled over the nearly finished house lingered like a long exhale, holding the quiet before the first footsteps crossed the threshold. That silence, so full of expectation, carries us forward into the moment when the interior of the great house begins to claim its identity. The stone walls were now firm against the mountain winds, the towers stood watch over the valley, and the limestone gleamed softly in the changing light. Yet within the walls the rooms remained open, waiting for the details that would complete their character. The transition from construction site to living home would require its own careful transformation, one that demanded the same dedication that had shaped the exterior. Inside, the air carried the scent of fresh wood shavings and cooling plaster. Sunlight angled through tall windows left uncurtained, casting long shafts of brightness across unfinished floors. Workers moved quietly through the house, each one focused on a specific craft. In some rooms, the measured taps of carpenters filled the space as they installed carved oak paneling. In others, the soft scraping of tile setters echoed as they placed each piece with precision, working their way across the floors and walls. The sound of hammers, softened by distance, mixed with the faint murmur of voices, creating a subdued rhythm that filled the house without disturbing its underlying calm. The great hall, destined to become one of the most striking spaces in the home, rose above all others with its immense height. Workers balanced on scaffolding high above the floor as they prepared the wooden framework that would conceal the steel trusses holding the roof aloft. These structural elements were essential for safety and stability, yet they needed to be hidden to preserve the illusion of medieval timbering. Each beam was shaped, stained, and placed with deliberate care, ensuring that the final result would appear as though it had been part of the house for centuries. Below, the large stone fireplaces awaited finishing touches, their hearths still empty, their mantels not yet warmed by firelight. Nearby, the winter garden began to take on its distinctive form. The glass ceiling, complex in its geometry, required more than simple installation. Each pane needed to be fitted into a frame that would support its weight, allow for temperature fluctuations, and channel sunlight in a controlled way. The space beneath the glass was still bare, but already one could imagine the effect of natural light pouring down onto the future display of plants and ferns. The contrast between stone walls and living greenery would create a sense of outdoor space within the protective enclosure of the house, offering a quiet retreat for its future residents and guests. Across the hallways and along the corridors, workers installed lighting fixtures that reflected the careful blending of historical inspiration and modern convenience. Electric bulbs were new, and their presence in every room signaled a forward-thinking approach. Yet the fixtures themselves were designed to resemble earlier forms, made of wrought iron or brass, shaped to echo the designs of candle sconces or lanterns from centuries past. This merging of old and new was characteristic of the house's design. Every room sought to uphold a sense of timelessness while quietly embracing the technologies that would make life more comfortable. One of the most complex spaces to finish was the library. Its tall shelves made of richly carved walnut extended upward toward a ceiling painted with mythological scenes. The shelves would one day hold thousands of volumes, each selected, read, and treasured by George. For now, they stood empty, waiting for the collection to be brought from storage. The fireplace in the library received attention from artisans skilled in stone carving and woodwork, ensuring that the room would feel warm and inviting despite its size. Large windows brought in generous light, making the space feel open despite the density of wood and books it would eventually hold. In the music room, the plasterwork required fine attention. Artisans shaped patterns along the edges of walls and around the future placement of tapestries. Scaffolding filled the room for months as decorative details were molded and applied. The built-in organ, a remarkable feature, awaited installation, its pipes polished and stored carefully until the room was ready to receive them. When completed, this room would serve as a gathering place for evenings of quiet listening, offering space for music that would drift through the corridors with a gentle resonance. Below these grand rooms, the basement level developed its own identity. The swimming pool, empty and silent, displayed its intricate tilework in shades that would reflect water once filled. The heating system for the pool required careful engineering. Pipes would carry warm water to the basin, and underwater lighting fixtures were prepared to add a subtle glow. The gymnasium adjacent to the pool slowly took shape with smooth wooden floors and spaces designated for early exercise equipment. These rooms represented a forward-thinking approach to health and leisure, offering activities unusual for private homes at the time. The kitchens formed a complex network of spaces designed for efficiency and cleanliness. Refrigeration units were tested, stoves were installed, and storage shelves were arranged to accommodate a wide variety of ingredients. The presence of 3 kitchens signaled the estate's need to prepare numerous meals for guests, staff, and the household. Copper pots and pans hung from racks, gleaming even before they were used. Sinks with running water stood ready for the tasks ahead, and the tiled floors promised durability and ease of maintenance. As each room neared completion, workers transitioned from large-scale tasks to finer details. Doors were fitted with custom-made knobs and hinges. Windows received their final panes and hardware. Fabric for draperies and upholstery was brought in, chosen for its durability and elegance. Furniture arrived from workshops in the United States and Europe, each piece selected to fit the character of its designated room. Rugs were unrolled carefully across polished floors. Paintings were hung, tapestries mounted, chandeliers tested. Every element found its place through a quiet, deliberate process. During this time, the number of workers on site slowly decreased. The sounds of construction softened, scaffolding came down, open spaces filled with furnishings. What had been a building under constant transformation now began to feel settled. As the final touches were applied, the house seemed to wait once more, but this time with an air of readiness. George visited frequently, studying the rooms, testing the lighting, moving through the corridors silently as though memorizing each detail. His vision had moved from imagination to physical form, and now he stood within it. Even the land outside continued to change. Paths were cleared, gardens outlined and terraces shaped. Workers planted trees and shrubs in planned arrangements to frame the house and guide visitors through the grounds. The estate began to resemble the unified environment that George had imagined years earlier, combining natural beauty with cultivated design. At last, the moment approached when the house would no longer be a site of preparation, but a place of welcome. The doors would open, the lamps would glow, and the interior spaces would come alive for the first time. The light inside the house softened as evening fell, illuminating the rooms that had only recently been completed. The anticipation deepened as the house stood in silence once more, ready to become what it was always meant to be. That silence would soon be broken by the arrival of guests, stepping across the threshold on a winter evening that marked the beginning of a new chapter in the life of the great estate. The image of that winter evening lingers in the air, the house illuminated from within for the first time, its long windows glowing softly against the dark outline of the mountains. That light, warm and steady, becomes the bridge into the next chapter. It is not the light of construction lamps or workmen's lanterns, but the calm illumination of a home finally ready to receive those who would give it life. Into this quiet glow, carriages begin to approach along the winding road designed by the landscape architect who shaped the estate's outer world. The road curves gently, revealing the house in stages, allowing the first guests to experience it gradually, almost ceremonially, as the builder intended. Imagine the carriage wheels compressing the winter earth as they move along the approach road. The trees have lost their leaves, creating a clear view of the structure ahead. To those arriving, the sight must have seemed extraordinary. No other house in America matched its scale, and none had been built in such a setting. The limestone facade, pale in daylight, now appeared almost golden under the glow of the lamps. Towers and roofs created a silhouette against the evening sky, rising in shapes that suggested both history and ambition. This was the night the house would reveal its full identity. When the carriages stop before the entrance, a stillness follows. The guests step out, pausing for a moment to look up at the structure rising above them. The carved stone details, the lintels, the arches, the great entrance door all suggest a lineage that stretches back centuries. Yet the air around them carries the chill of a North Carolina winter, reminding them that this is not France or England, but a new expression of old forms. As the doors open, warm air spills outward, and a faint scent of polished wood and evergreen greets them. Inside, the first space they encounter is the winter garden. Its glass ceiling allows the night sky to filter through faintly, while the lamps placed throughout the room cast soft reflections on the leaves of palms and ferns. The floor beneath their feet is tiled in subtle patterns. The sound of water from the central fountain adds a gentle rhythm to the room. The guests pause here, absorbing the unexpected serenity of this indoor garden. It is neither a formal hall nor a grand reception area. Instead, it is a place of calm, chosen deliberately to ease visitors into the world of the house without overwhelming them. From the winter garden, they are guided toward the banquet hall. The transition feels like moving from one atmosphere to another. The ceiling rises dramatically as they enter, drawing the eye upward to the painted beams that conceal the steel trusses above. The scale of the room becomes immediately apparent. The massive fireplaces at one end give a sense of steady warmth, their flames flickering against the stone. Tapestries from the 16th century line the walls, their woven scenes illuminated gently by electric lights designed to mimic candle flame. The long table stretches across the room, set with polished silver and fine china. Each piece has been chosen carefully, reflecting the same devotion to detail seen throughout the house. Though this room is grand, the atmosphere remains calm. The house is not yet filled with the noise of large gatherings or the hum of conversations. Instead, it carries a quiet dignity, as though recognizing the significance of this first occasion. Guests move slowly, taking time to observe the room from different angles. They notice how the windows frame the night outside, how the light shifts across the floor, how the tapestries soften the stone walls. Everything feels intentional, balanced, measured. From the banquet hall, they pass into the library. Here, the atmosphere changes again. The walls are lined with shelves filled with books that George has collected over years of study and travel. The painted ceiling adds a sense of intimacy, drawing the room together despite its size. A fire burns steadily in the fireplace, casting a warm glow on the polished wood. Comfortable chairs are arranged in clusters, inviting quiet reading or thoughtful conversation. Guests who enjoy literature pause here for longer than they planned, recognizing that the room reflects not just wealth, but genuine intellectual engagement. Other rooms reveal themselves gradually throughout the evening. The music room, though not hosting musicians on this first night, conveys an air of preparation. The billiard room, with its paneled walls and deep colors, suggests that future evenings will be spent in calm companionship. The breakfast room offers a gentler brightness, designed for the light of morning. Each space makes its impression quietly, without demanding attention. As the evening unfolds, the house begins to feel lived in. The movement of guests from room to room creates a soft murmur of voices. Footsteps echo lightly on the floors. Lamps glow in the hallways. Fires crackle steadily in several rooms at once. For the first time, the house receives the sounds and presence of human life. It is no longer a quiet construction site or a series of empty rooms. It is a home. Throughout this first evening, George moves among his guests with quiet composure. He does not seek attention, nor does he attempt to direct the flow of conversation. Instead, he observes, listening to comments about the architecture, the furnishings, the atmosphere. He notes which rooms seem to comfort visitors and which surprise them. He stands near the great hall at one point, looking upward at the ceiling he had imagined so many times, now complete and illuminated. Perhaps he feels a deep sense of fulfillment, softened by the knowledge that the house will continue to evolve long after this night. Outside, the cold deepens. Frost begins to form on the stone terraces, yet inside, the warmth continues. Guests linger in the winter garden as the evening draws to a close, the sound of water stilling their thoughts. The palms sway slightly in the gentlest currents of air. Above them, the glass ceiling reflects the faint glow of interior lamps. The atmosphere remains calm, peaceful, unhurried. When the guests eventually depart, the carriages move away from the house in the same slow rhythm with which they arrived. The lights of the house remain visible for some time as they travel down the approach road. Once they vanish into the trees, the estate grows quiet again. The house stands illuminated against the night, no longer waiting for its first gathering. It has welcomed its guests, and in doing so has taken its place fully within the landscape. Now, with the first evening completed, the house will begin to take on new roles. It will host gatherings, and it will shelter quiet days. It will become the setting for study, conversation, rest, and discovery. But on this night, after the last carriage has disappeared from view, the house settles into a silence that feels different from all the silences that came before. It is no longer a waiting silence. It is the calm of a home at rest. And as the lamps dim one by one, another sound prepares to rise within the house, a sound that will define the daily rhythm of life here, though it remains hidden for now, waiting behind closed doors. The sound that waits behind those closed doors is soft at first, almost imperceptible, yet it will soon guide the daily pulse of the great house more surely than any clock. It is the sound of footsteps, purposeful and steady, belonging to those whose lives unfold not in the grand rooms where guests gather, but in the hidden corridors, stairwells, and workspaces that form the unseen structure of the estate. With the last lamp extinguished in the main rooms after that first night, a quiet presence moves through the darkness. Preparing the house for the next day before dawn has even begun to touch the sky. In the earliest hours of morning, when the mountains are still wrapped in a cold blue twilight, the servants begin their work. Their world exists parallel to the one the guests experience, yet the two intersect only through the results of their labor. Housemaids rise from narrow beds in simple but clean quarters, located far from the rooms they will tend. The stone walls of the house echo softly as they move down the back stairways, carrying buckets, brushes, and small bundles of cleaning cloths. They light lamps in the service hallways, careful to keep the flames low so as not to disturb the quiet in the main rooms above. Their first task is always the same: preparing the fireplaces. Nearly every occupied room contains one, and each requires cleaning, resetting, and relighting before the household awakens. Ash is removed, grates are polished, and fresh logs are arranged with practiced efficiency. The faint scent of wood smoke slowly fills the air as small flames begin to glow behind the iron screens. These fires must be lit early enough that the rooms will feel warm when the family descends for breakfast. The housemaids work quickly, without speaking, their movements practiced and nearly silent. In the kitchens, the staff begins its day even earlier. The head chef arrives before the others, reviewing supplies, checking the provisions delivered the previous day, and planning the morning's meals. Refrigeration units hum quietly in the background, their presence a rare example of modern convenience in an era when most households still relied on ice boxes. The stoves are lit next, their warmth gradually filling the large room. Copper pots are arranged on hooks, and the ingredients for breakfast are prepared. The kitchen maids work at long wooden tables, chopping, peeling, and organizing. Fresh bread from the estate's bakery is brought in, its warmth still clinging to the crust. As the light outside shifts slowly from twilight to dawn, the butler oversees the preparation of the dining room. He inspects the table, ensuring that every piece of silver is polished to a quiet sheen, that the crystal glasses reflect the early morning light without a single mark, and that the folded napkins rest precisely in place. Footmen assist him, moving soundlessly around the room as they set out dishes, arrange seating, and prepare to serve the family. Their training emphasizes precision and discretion. Their presence should be felt only through the smoothness of service, never through disruption. Elsewhere in the house, valets and ladies' maids awaken to prepare the family's clothing. Brushes glide across fabric to remove dust. Shoes are polished until they reflect the room around them. Fresh garments are laid out carefully. These small rituals form the foundation of each day, allowing the household to function without visible strain. Meanwhile, outside the house itself, the work continues on a different scale. Gardeners arrive at the greenhouses and tool sheds, preparing for the tasks ahead. In the winter months, their work centers on maintenance, tending to the evergreens, caring for the plants in the conservatories, and ensuring that walkways remain clear and safe. During warmer seasons, they prune, plant, water, and cultivate, shaping the grounds to match the designs of the landscape architect who conceived them. Their work is patient and continuous, following the rhythm of the seasons rather than the pace of the house. The estate's farm workers also begin early. The dairy, essential to the estate's intended self-sufficiency, requires attention at dawn. Cows are milked, animals fed, and deliveries prepared. The orchards and vegetable gardens demand consistent care, providing produce not only for the family, but for the many workers whose lives depend on the estate for livelihood. Foresters venture into the woods, inspecting the young trees planted in recent years, ensuring that erosion is controlled and that the land continues its slow restoration. Their work reflects the broader vision behind the estate, a commitment not just to beauty, but to renewal. As morning advances, the house transitions into a different kind of activity. The servants move through the hallways more quickly now, completing the tasks that must be finished before the family awakens. Beds are made, carpets swept, curtains drawn to allow in the morning light. The winter garden is prepared again, its plants misted lightly, its fountain checked. The scent of breakfast begins to drift through the lower corridors, carried by warm air rising from the kitchen. The family descends at last. Their movements mark the shift from preparation to service. Footmen open doors, chairs are pulled out quietly, and breakfast is served with calm efficiency. The household appears effortless in its operation, but behind every moment lies the coordinated work of dozens of individuals. Conversations at the table flow without interruption, and the rooms around them feel warm, bright, and orderly. It is easy for guests to believe that the house runs smoothly by nature, that its size and complexity pose no challenge. This illusion is intentional. The staff's role is not merely to perform tasks, but to create a seamless experience. Throughout the day, the pattern continues. Housemaids clean the rooms after breakfast, polishing wood, dusting surfaces, replacing linens, and checking every detail. The kitchens prepare meals not only for the family, but for the staff, who dine separately in their own hall. Deliveries arrive at the service entrance, where they are inspected and stored. Letters are received, cataloged, and distributed. The butler oversees the movement of goods and information, ensuring that the household remains in orderly rhythm. In the late afternoon, preparations begin for dinner. The kitchen becomes busy once more, the sound of chopping and stirring mingling with the faint clatter of utensils. Footmen polish the dining room fixtures again, lighting candles or adjusting electric lamps depending on the occasion. The house grows quieter in the hours before evening, a calm that reflects the steady cycle of daily life. As night approaches, the servants continue to work behind the scenes. Fires are tended, the halls are swept, beds are turned down, lamps are dimmed. The staff retreats gradually to their own quarters, but only after ensuring that the house stands ready for the next day. And always, just beyond the glow of the main rooms, a door remains slightly ajar. Behind it lies the network of halls and stairways through which the estate's quiet workforce continues its unseen movement, preparing once again for dawn. That hidden door, barely noticed by guests, leads us into the deeper structure of life within the estate, where the servants, though seldom acknowledged, shape the rhythm of every day. The barely open door, resting against its frame with a soft hush of air, remains in view as the next chapter begins. Its narrow gap reveals nothing at first glance, but it marks the entrance to a world that shaped every hour of life inside the house. Step toward it, and the glow of the main corridors fades behind you. The polished floors give way to plain boards, the high ceilings descend to modest heights, the ornate fixtures disappear, replaced by simple lamps burning at lower wattage. Here, in the hidden spaces behind the grand rooms, the true engine of the estate reveals itself in quiet, tireless motion. Beyond that door lies a maze of hallways known only to those who served. The servants' corridors were designed to be efficient rather than beautiful, wide enough for two people to pass while carrying trays or armloads of linens. Walls were painted in light but unadorned colors, chosen for practicality. Turning through one passage after another, the sounds of the house changed. The muffled footsteps of the family and their guests faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of work. A single footman walking briskly could be heard long before he turned a corner, the soles of his shoes marking a tempo that set the pace for others. These corridors connected every part of the house. A narrow staircase led upward to the servants' bedrooms, small but tidy spaces arranged under the roof or behind the thick walls of the wings. The stairs were steep and utilitarian, built for frequent use. Another staircase descended into the kitchens, where heat gathered even in winter. Still others wound their way past storage rooms for linens, silver, china, and the house's many supplies. Each room had a clear purpose. There was no wasted space. In these back corridors, form followed function with absolute clarity. For the servants who lived here, the distinction between public and private space was sharply defined. Their quarters were comfortable by the standards of the time, but modest compared to the elaborate rooms upstairs. A typical bedroom contained a narrow bed, a small dresser, a washstand, and perhaps a single chair. The windows were few, and the view, when visible, often overlooked the service yards rather than the distant mountains. Yet even in these small spaces, an orderliness prevailed. Servants decorated with simple touches: a folded quilt, a framed photograph, a vase holding a dried sprig of flowers from the estate gardens. Life in these quarters followed a disciplined rhythm. Each servant knew the exact time to rise, the tasks expected, and the standards that must be met. The housekeeper and the butler, the highest-ranking members of the staff, maintained a strict hierarchy. The housekeeper oversaw the female servants. She assigned cleaning duties, inspected rooms, and managed the storage of linens. Her office, tucked away near the main service staircase, contained ledgers that recorded every item in the house. Nothing moved without her notice. The butler directed the male servants, managing the flow of the household like the conductor of a quiet orchestra. He controlled the silver vault, a small room where every piece of cutlery, tray, and vessel was stored in velvet-lined drawers. Each piece had a number, and each number had a place. The ringing of bells was once the heartbeat of the servant system. In earlier years, rooms throughout the house were equipped with call bells that sent signals to a board in the servants' hall. A series of flags or lights indicated where assistance was needed. As electricity advanced, the bells were replaced by an early intercom system, allowing communication between the main floors and the service areas. A button pressed discreetly in one of the formal rooms triggered a soft buzz below stairs. This innovation shaped a new kind of quiet. Instead of loud bells ringing unpredictably, a muted signal spread through the service areas, alerting staff without disturbing guests. Meals were one of the most carefully orchestrated tasks. The process began hours before the family entered the dining room. Footmen in the service hallway aligned themselves in a straight row, each holding a service cloth folded precisely over one arm. They waited silently for the signal to proceed. When the butler opened the door, they moved as one, stepping into the formal rooms with calm, measured gait. Their presence seemed effortless, but behind each movement lay hours of training. They placed dishes swiftly but without haste, anticipated needs without being asked, and withdrew quietly before conversation shifted. The kitchen corridors formed a world unto themselves. They were warmer, brighter, and filled with the scent of whatever meal was being prepared. Copper pots hung in orderly rows. Cutting boards were worn smooth by years of use. The sound of knives on wood formed its own rhythm. Kitchen maids prepared vegetables, meats, and desserts with practiced efficiency. The head chef called out instructions in a level tone, ensuring that dishes would be ready at the exact moment required. Precision mattered. A delay of even minutes could disrupt the timing of a meal served across multiple courses. Laundry work took place in a series of rooms designed specifically for the purpose. Large tubs and drying racks dominated the space. Steam rose as linens were boiled, washed, and ironed. The heat could be intense, especially in summer, but the laundry maids worked steadily, folding sheets and tablecloths into perfect stacks. In a house of this scale, laundry was a constant task. Every room produced work. Towels from the bathrooms, napkins from the dining room, blankets from the guest bedrooms. The laundry rooms rarely fell silent. Elsewhere, the butler's pantry served as a transition point between the kitchens and the dining rooms. It contained storage for silver trays, glassware, and dishes. Footmen moved between the pantry and the main dining room repeatedly throughout the day. This small space was arranged with the same precision as the silver vault. Each plate had its place, each glass its exact location. The butler inspected everything personally before the footmen carried it out. Communication among the servants relied on subtlety. A nod in the hallway, a quick glance exchanged between workers, a handwritten note left beside a doorway. These small gestures ensured that no detail was overlooked. The servants' world operated like a quiet, self-contained system whose purpose was to support the visible grandeur of the estate. As evening descended, the servants' work did not end. Fires needed tending, dishes washing, lamps refilling. Housemaids made their final rounds, ensuring the corridors remained spotless. The butler reviewed the next day's schedule, making notes for the footmen. The housekeeper inspected linens laid out for morning tasks. By the time the servants retreated to their own quarters, the estate had settled into a calm that masked the depth of labor required to maintain it. And yet, behind one particular door in the service wing, a different kind of work continued. Work that did not involve cleaning or carrying, but required patience, judgment, and a quiet sense of responsibility. For it was in that room that the house itself was managed, where decisions were made not only about the household, but about the estate's future. That room, still lit by a single lamp, long after the rest of the house had grown still, leads us to the next part of the story, where the presence of important guests would soon shape the estate's identity in new ways. The lamplight in that quiet room of the service wing glows steadily as night deepens, its circle of warmth spilling across the desk where schedules, letters, and ledgers lie open. It is here, in this small but essential space that decisions are reviewed long after the rest of the house has settled. The butler makes notes for the morning. The housekeeper finalizes assignments. The steward looks over accounts. This room is less visible than any of the grand chambers above, yet it holds the pulse of the estate. And as the lamp burns low, a subtle shift begins to unfold, one that carries us into a new chapter of the estate's early life, shaped not by architecture or daily work alone, but by the presence of guests whose impressions, conversations, and experiences would soon define the home's identity in the wider world. The first wave of notable visitors arrived in the years following the estate's opening, drawn by curiosity, admiration, or long-standing connections to the Vanderbilt family. Some came from cities along the East Coast, where industry and society intersected in ways that shaped the American landscape. Others traveled from Europe, intrigued by the idea of a grand chateau built in the mountains of North Carolina. Many had visited the great houses of England and France, and they approached the estate with expectations shaped by old-world traditions. Yet what they found here felt both familiar and profoundly new. Their journeys often began with the long train ride south, followed by a carriage journey along the winding mountain roads. By the time they reached the entrance gate, they had left behind the noise of cities and entered a quieter world. The approach road, lined with young trees and arranged to reveal the house gradually, prepared visitors for the impression that awaited them at the crest of the ridge. When the house finally came into view, its limestone facade rising against the blue folds of the mountains, many guests found themselves caught in a quiet moment of awe. Upon entering the house, their experience followed a careful progression. They passed through the winter garden, its palms and ferns softening the formality of arrival. They paused in the great hall, absorbing the scale and craftsmanship. They felt the warmth of the fireplaces, the glow of the lamps, the texture of stone beneath their hands. Each room introduced a deliberate balance of grandeur and intimacy, as though the architecture sought not to impress, but to welcome. Meals in the banquet hall reinforced this impression. While the room itself was imposing, with its high ceiling and monumental fireplaces, the atmosphere remained calm. The table settings glowed under the steady light of electric fixtures, shaped to resemble candles. Footmen moved quietly among the guests. Conversation flowed at an unhurried pace, guided not by social obligation, but by the comfort of the surroundings. Even those accustomed to the formality of European estates noticed the difference. There was dignity here, but not austerity, elegance, but not pretension. After dinner, guests often made their way into the music room for a quiet evening. The organ, with its polished pipes and carefully tuned notes, offered a depth of sound that filled the room without overwhelming it. Sometimes a guest played, sometimes the instrument remained silent, appreciated for its presence alone. The music room became a refuge where visitors could reflect on the day's impressions. From its windows, they could see the faint outline of the mountains, softened by night. During their stays, guests explored different parts of the house. The library became a place of particular fascination. Many lingered among its shelves, studying the breadth of the collection. Some browsed quietly, selecting volumes to read in the soft chairs placed near the fire. Others examined the paintings and the carved details of the room, noting how its design balanced scholarship and comfort. The winter garden beckoned as well, especially in colder months when warmth and greenery offered a welcome contrast to the crisp air outside. Exploring the estate grounds revealed yet another dimension of the property's character. Guests walked the terraces, their steps soft against the gravel paths. They observed the orderly rows of young trees planted in the early years of the forestry project. They noted how the landscape architect's plan created a natural flow from cultivated gardens to wild woodland. The sound of the river reached them faintly from the valley below. Even brief walks offered a sense of calm that lingered long after the day ended. Some visitors ventured further, riding horses along the estate trails or touring the farm to observe the dairy operations, the fields, and the livestock. These excursions offered insights into the estate's broader purpose. It was not merely a grand home. It was a functioning, self-sustaining domain where agricultural work, forestry management, and architectural achievement converged. Guests found themselves reflecting on how these elements supported one another. The estate was vast, but it was not disconnected from the land. Instead, it sought to renew it. Evenings in the house carried a quiet rhythm. Guests wrote letters in their bedrooms, describing the estate to friends and family. They remarked on the comfort of the rooms, the soft texture of the linens, and the way the mountain air drifted gently through the windows when opened. Many commented on the silence of the nights. In a world where cities were growing louder and more crowded, the stillness of the estate felt like a luxury of its own. Through these impressions, relationships were strengthened. The Vanderbilt family, though private by nature, extended genuine hospitality. Their guests did not leave feeling dazzled or overwhelmed. They departed feeling restored. Word of the estate spread slowly, not as a public attraction, but as a quiet marvel, known primarily through conversations and letters. For those who visited, the experience offered a glimpse into a uniquely American vision of beauty, hospitality, and thoughtful living. Yet while these early years brought admiration and companionship, they also hinted at the challenges that would come. Maintaining such a vast estate required resources, planning, and steady oversight. The balance between grandeur and practicality remained delicate. Visitors might leave refreshed, but the household staff, managers, and family would continue the ongoing work of sustaining the estate through seasons of change. And it is just beyond the glow of those conversations, in the quiet hours after guests retired to their rooms, that another story begins to emerge. A story shaped not by celebration, but by the unspoken weight of responsibility that settled across the estate as the world around it shifted. That weight grows heavier as the estate moves into the new century, where unexpected storms, both literal and financial, begin to cast their long shadows across its future. The long shadows that begin to stretch across the estate do not fall suddenly. They appear first as subtle hints, barely noticeable to guests who walk the terraces or admire the great hall's carvings. Yet those who work within the house and those who guide its future sense the gradual shift. The world beyond the mountains is changing. The pace of industry is accelerating. Economic tides rise and fall with increasing force. Political currents grow unpredictable. And through every change, the quiet weight of responsibility settles more firmly on the shoulders of those tasked with preserving the estate's vast operations. As the new century unfolds, the estate's quiet beauty remains unchanged. The mountains still rise in gentle folds beyond the terraces. The winter garden still glows with filtered light. Fires burn steadily in the great hall, and the rhythms of daily life continue to flow from dawn to night. But beneath the calm surface, the costs of maintaining such a place begin to surge. Heating the house through winter requires a small forest's worth of firewood. Staffing the estate demands not dozens, but hundreds of skilled workers. Feeding the household, caring for the grounds, managing the fields, orchards, livestock, and forests all require substantial resources. Even replacing the incandescent bulbs that illuminate the house, bulbs still new to the era, adds to an ever-growing list of financial demands. In earlier years, these expenses were manageable. The Vanderbilt fortune, built from railroads and industry, had seemed inexhaustible. But fortunes shift with the changing world. New regulations, economic downturns, and fluctuations in the markets begin to constrict the flow of wealth. While the Vanderbilt name remains influential, the family is not immune to the pressures of the era. In private letters and conversations, the growing concern becomes clear. The estate, beautiful and visionary, demands far more than the ordinary income of even a prosperous family. The first real strain appears in the financial ledgers that pass quietly through the service wing's lamp-lit office. The estate manager, tasked with maintaining order across thousands of acres, begins to note rising costs. Repairs, even small ones, add up quickly. Machinery used in the fields needs replacement. Livestock require care. The young trees planted in the forestry project demand attention and new rounds of planting. The dairy, though productive, operates at high cost, and the house itself, its stonework, its plumbing, its heating systems, requires constant upkeep. Yet despite these growing challenges, George remains committed to the estate's long-term vision. His belief in scientific forestry, in sustainable farming, and in thoughtful stewardship does not waver. He continues to invest time and resources into ensuring that the land recovers from years of overuse. He supports the workers who maintain the estate. He studies new methods and invites experts to advise on agricultural practices. His devotion is quiet but unwavering, and those around him sense that he sees the estate not merely as a home, but as a legacy worth safeguarding. But the world beyond the mountains grows more unsettled. The nation enters a period of economic uncertainty. Political tensions abroad hint at conflicts yet to come. New technologies begin reshaping daily life far more rapidly than earlier innovations had. The estate, once built at the cutting edge of modernity, now must adapt continuously to avoid falling behind. Visitors who come during this time still experience the estate as a place of calm beauty. They walk the gardens and admire the house without sensing the growing strain. The servants maintain the same quiet precision. The meals remain elegant. The house remains warm. But inside the administrative rooms, within the stacks of ledgers and correspondence, the story is changing. Quiet adjustments begin. Certain expenses are postponed or reduced. Projects planned for future years are reconsidered. The estate continues to function smoothly, but with increasing caution. The early years of the new century also bring moments of intense weather that test the estate's resilience. Heavy rains cause erosion along the slopes. Winds batter the high roofs. Winter storms force workers to spend long hours repairing damage or clearing fallen branches. The forest managers note that some younger trees suffer in harsh seasons, requiring replanting and careful nurturing. Each storm, each challenge reminds the estate stewards of the vulnerability that accompanies such scale. Meanwhile, the family's life quietly evolves. George and Edith welcome a daughter, Cornelia, whose early years unfold within the calm beauty of the estate. She plays in the gardens, wanders through the winter garden's warm air, and explores the great hall's echoing spaces. For her, the estate is not a marvel, but a home. Her laughter drifts through the rooms, offering a contrast to the growing financial concerns that begin to occupy her parents' thoughts. As Cornelia grows, her presence adds new meaning to the estate's future. George considers the responsibilities she will one day inherit. He hopes she will love the land as he does, understand its history, and value its role in protecting the forest and soil. Yet he is also aware that the world she will inherit is changing quickly. Whether she will embrace or struggle with the estate's demands remains an open question. By the time the estate enters its second decade of life, the financial pressures have grown more pronounced. The country's economic landscape shifts again, pushing industries and fortunes into new patterns. Even the Vanderbilt family, long associated with prosperity, must adapt. Decisions are made to reduce some operations, consolidate staff, and seek new efficiencies. Yet the house and the land remain immense, and no amount of adjustment can alter the fundamental scale of responsibility. Those who work for the estate observe the changes first. The number of staff fluctuates. Some positions remain unfilled after workers retire or move on. Seasonal workers are hired more cautiously. Repairs are handled more slowly unless urgent. The atmosphere remains calm, but a quiet awareness grows among those who have served the estate for years. They sense that the margin for error has narrowed, that the future holds uncertainties that cannot yet be spoken aloud. Still, the estate endures. The land continues to recover under careful management. The forestry project gains recognition for its innovation. The dairy remains productive. The gardens flourish in warmer seasons, drawing admiration from every visitor. The winter garden still glows softly on cold mornings, and the house continues to stand against the mountain sky, its limestone walls unchanged by the private struggles that unfold within. But beyond the ridge, beyond the quiet fields and forests, the world marches toward a storm that no estate, no fortune, and no family can escape. A global conflict approaches, bringing with it consequences that will touch even the peaceful mountains of North Carolina. And it is that distant storm, felt first as a faint tremor across the nation, that leads us into the next chapter of the estate's long, fragile journey. The faint tremor of that distant storm moves through the wider world long before it reaches the quiet valleys around the estate. At first, it is little more than a shift in the tone of newspapers, a subtle change in the language of political discussions, and the uneasy awareness that events unfolding across the ocean may eventually touch every corner of American life. The estate remains peaceful, the mountains stand unchanged, the forests sway in familiar patterns, and the great house continues its quiet routines. Yet beneath the surface of daily life, the first signs of global tension begin to weave their way into conversations, correspondence, and the cautious adjustments made by those responsible for guiding the estate through uncertain times. As news of conflict abroad becomes more frequent, the estate's operations feel the pressure indirectly but unmistakably. Supplies that once arrived from distant regions without delay now take longer to reach the mountains. Prices rise as shipping routes shift and industries redirect their efforts. Workers discuss the news quietly among themselves in the service hallways, speaking in low voices while folding linens or preparing meals. Many have family members living in other states or serving in the military, and letters become a source of both comfort and worry. Though the estate stands far from the centers of political debate, its people carry the weight of the wider world in their thoughts. For the Vanderbilt family, the growing conflict adds another layer of strain to the estate's already challenging financial situation. Economic downturns ripple outward, affecting investments and reducing the stability that once seemed assured. Decisions that had been postponed now require urgent attention. Entire sections of the estate budget must be reconsidered. George studies the financial ledgers with quiet intensity, often working late into the night at the small desk where early worries had first taken shape. He reviews expenses, consults with advisors, and writes letters that reflect a mix of determination and concern. Yet even as these pressures mount, George remains committed to the land. He understands that the forestry project, begun with the hope of healing the soil, represents an investment that will surpass his own lifetime. The young trees planted across thousands of acres continue to grow, their roots strengthening the hillsides. The estate's foresters monitor their progress closely, adjusting management practices in response to changing conditions. Despite the uncertainty of the era, the land shows steady signs of renewal. Visitors to the estate at this time still find it beautiful and serene. They walk the terraces, often unaware of the private concerns carried by the family and staff. They admire the gardens, which bloom as reliably as ever in spring and summer. They sit beside the winter garden's fountain and comment on the calm atmosphere, grateful for a moment of respite from the turmoil appearing in newspapers. For many, the estate becomes a place of reflection, a reminder that beauty and tranquility can persist even in troubling times. But the estate cannot remain untouched forever. When the nation moves closer to war, resources shift dramatically. Railway schedules change. Materials that once seemed abundant become scarce. Skilled workers leave to serve in the military or support wartime industries. The estate's operations, already adjusted in earlier years, must adapt again. Machinery on the farm is repaired instead of replaced. Staff members take on additional responsibilities. Long-standing routines become more flexible out of necessity. Despite these challenges, a sense of unity develops among those who remain. The servants work with renewed purpose, understanding that their efforts help keep the estate functioning during difficult times. Gardeners tend the grounds with quiet dedication. Farm workers continue their tasks despite shortages. The dairy maintains production, providing essential goods not only for the household, but for the surrounding community. The house continues to offer a sense of stability, its fires burning steadily through the winter months. In the midst of these efforts, an unexpected sorrow settles over the estate. In the spring of 1914, while traveling abroad, George falls ill. His condition worsens rapidly, leaving his family deeply concerned. Doctors are consulted, but despite their efforts, he does not recover. His passing marks a profound turning point for the estate. The loss is felt not only by his family, who mourn quietly in the rooms he once walked, but also by the many workers who respected him deeply. They had watched him move through the grounds with thoughtful eyes, learning the patterns of the land and speaking to them with kindness. His vision had shaped the estate in ways they understood intimately. In the days following his death, the estate grows unusually quiet. Footsteps seem softer, conversations muted. The winter garden, once a place of light and calm, feels noticeably still. Edith, now responsible for guiding the estate, carries the weight of grief and duty with strength. But the challenges before her are immense. She must navigate not only the personal sorrow of losing her husband, but the practical realities of supporting an estate of unprecedented scale during a time of global instability. Letters arrive from friends and acquaintances offering condolences. Newspapers carry brief notices. The estate's workers gather to pay their respects, standing together in silence near the house that George had brought into being. The forests he planted stand behind them, a living reminder of his devotion to the land. The estate that had once represented a bold vision for the future now feels fragile, its path uncertain. In the weeks and months that follow, Edith moves steadily into the role of steward. She studies the ledgers, meets with the estate managers, and consults with experts on agriculture, forestry, and finances. Her determination is quiet but firm. She understands that the estate's survival will require difficult decisions that will shape not only her own life, but the future of the land her husband loved. Outside the house, the world continues its march toward conflict. War erupts, sending shockwaves across nations. The estate feels these effects in countless ways, through rationing, through shortages, through the emotional strain carried by workers with loved ones abroad. Yet amid these changes, one constant remains: the land itself growing, changing, enduring. And it is through that land, and through the unexpected resilience it reveals in the years that follow, that the estate begins to find new pathways towards survival, even as new challenges rise on the horizon. The horizon that once felt distant now presses closer, and the estate enters the next decade carrying both the memory of loss and the weight of uncertainty. Edith moves through the great halls with steady purpose, often pausing near the winter garden where the soft light settles through the glass. It is here, surrounded by the quiet rhythm of growing plants, that she gathers her thoughts and prepares for the responsibilities that now rest entirely on her shoulders. The estate is vast, intricate, and expensive to maintain. Every decision she makes will ripple through the farms, the forests, the households, and the lives of the workers who have depended on the estate for generations. She senses the magnitude of what lies ahead, yet she does not hesitate. The winter garden's stillness becomes her transition into a period defined by resolve. In the early years after George's passing, it becomes clear that the estate cannot continue as it had before. The expenses associated with maintaining the enormous house, the extensive grounds, and the daily operations are immense. Even with disciplined management, the income generated from the farms and forestry projects falls short of supporting the estate's demands. Edith examines the account books with precision, tracing each figure with the same thoroughness George once used to study the patterns of the land. The two of them shared a belief in the estate's purpose, and for that reason she refuses to consider abandoning it. But she also understands that sentiment alone cannot keep the estate alive. Practical decisions are required, and many of them will challenge traditions. To stabilize operations, Edith begins with careful reductions. A number of staff positions are quietly consolidated or eliminated. Some rooms in the house are closed during seasons when they are not needed, reducing heating and maintenance costs. Portions of the gardens are simplified so that the remaining staff can manage them more efficiently. These changes, though modest, help ease the financial pressure. Yet even as Edith makes these adjustments, she remains committed to preserving the core elements that define the estate. She refuses to let the architecture suffer, ensuring that repairs are made on time and that the house retains the grace that has always distinguished it. Beyond the mansion, Edith turns her attention to the land. She meets regularly with foresters and agricultural managers to understand how each acre can contribute to the estate's stability. She encourages the continuation of the scientific forestry program, believing that its long-term benefits will honor George's legacy. The reforested hillsides strengthen year by year, and the maturing trees provide a sense of renewal that echoes through the estate. She visits these forests herself, sometimes accompanied by her daughter, walking along shaded paths where sunlight filters through young branches. The quiet strength of the land reassures her that the estate still has potential. While the land responds to careful management, the world beyond the mountains continues to shift. The United States enters the war overseas, altering the rhythm of American life. Industries are redirected toward military needs, transportation becomes more unpredictable, and shortages affect households across the country. The estate feels these effects immediately. Supplies that once arrived regularly now take longer to obtain. Tools and machinery wear down without easy replacement. Some workers enlist or leave to take jobs in war-related industries, creating additional pressure on the staff that remains. Yet the estate adapts, adjusting schedules and repurposing equipment to keep operations steady. The war also affects the emotional climate of the estate. Letters from soldiers become treasured items, read and reread by families living in the workers' cottages. The quiet conversations that once filled the service corridors now carry a different tone, shaped by concern and hope. Edith, sensitive to the hardships faced by the workers' families, ensures that support is provided whenever possible. The estate becomes a place where community matters deeply, where people share the burdens of the times with quiet solidarity. Despite the challenges, the estate maintains its sense of continuity. The seasons move over the land as they always have. Spring blossoms in the walled garden, summer brings long days to the farms, autumn fills the forests with deep color, and winter blankets the house and grounds in soft stillness. Visitors, though fewer in number, still arrive, seeking respite from the tense mood of the nation. They walk the terraces slowly, appreciating the calm atmosphere the estate continues to offer. Some comment that the house feels almost unchanged, a refuge from a world in flux. As the war draws to a close, Edith faces new questions about the estate's future. Returning soldiers seek work, families attempt to rebuild their lives, and the country enters a period of transition. Economic fluctuations follow, making financial planning difficult. Edith must decide whether to maintain the estate as it has always been or explore new possibilities. She studies the ledgers again, aware that the choices she makes will determine whether the estate can endure the decades ahead. It is during this time that the idea of opening the house to the public is first mentioned in conversation. At the time, it feels almost unthinkable. The estate has always been a private home, a place built for family and close acquaintances. Allowing strangers to walk through the grand rooms seems to challenge the very nature of the house. Yet Edith does not dismiss the suggestion immediately. She recognizes that the estate exists within a changing world, and that survival may require bold adjustments. She reflects on the long history of estates in Europe, many of which had already begun to welcome visitors to support their preservation. Could such an approach work in the mountains of North Carolina? Before she can act on these questions, she returns to the Winter Garden, the place where she is often considered the estate's greatest transitions. The air is quiet, and the gentle curve of the glass ceiling casts a soft light over the greenery. The plants sway slightly as if stirred by an unseen draft. This room, with its calm presence, has become the symbolic heart of the estate. It holds memories of George's dreams, the family's gatherings, and the quiet moments when future decisions were first imagined. It is here that she contemplates the estate's next chapter, aware that the path ahead will require courage and clarity. Yet in this stillness, she also senses possibility. The estate has survived loss, war, and economic strain. It has adapted before, and it can adapt again. The winter garden, with its balance of nature and architecture, becomes a metaphor for resilience. Its quiet beauty invites reflection, guiding her toward the realization that the estate's survival may depend not on safeguarding old customs, but on embracing new approaches while honoring the past. And as she leaves the winter garden, carrying that realization with her, she steps into the first quiet steps of a transformation that will reshape not only the estate's future, but its place in American history. She steps from the winter garden into the quiet corridor beyond, her decision still forming, fragile but unmistakable. The air feels cool against her face as she walks, and the faint echo of her footsteps follows her through the long hallway. This sound becomes the thread that carries the estate from contemplation into motion. She pauses once more beside a tall window overlooking the southern lawns, where winter sunlight lays across the dormant grass. The calmness of the landscape strengthens her resolve. The estate, vast and dignified, seems to be waiting for its next direction. That moment of suspended stillness, captured in the corridor with the sun falling low across the hills, becomes the opening of a new phase in the estate's long life. When spring arrives, the pressures that had accumulated over the previous decade become more difficult to ignore. The nation's economy shifts again, and with it, the estate's already fragile balance begins to show new strain. Farmer wages must be paid. Repairs to the greenhouses cannot be postponed. The long gravel drives require resurfacing after harsh weather. The roof slates loosen in several sections and must be secured before the next season's storms. Every task, every repair, every necessity pulls against the estate's resources. The once vast Vanderbilt fortune is still sizable, but its ability to carry the estate without change is fading year by year. Edith gathers her most trusted advisors in the small morning room, a modest space overlooking the terraced gardens. It is not a formal meeting place, but a practical one, filled with early light that helps keep long discussions calm and focused. They review ledgers, upcoming expenses, and projections for the next decade. Each line confirms what has already become clear. If the estate continues unchanged, it will eventually become impossible to maintain. She does not panic. Instead, she listens carefully, asks measured questions, and considers each suggestion with patience. The possibility of opening parts of the house to visitors returns in these conversations. It no longer sounds radical, it sounds necessary. Yet Edith does not rush to embrace the idea. She understands the emotional weight that such a change carries. To open the doors is to alter the nature of the home forever. It is to let the public step into the private world she and George had built. It is to bring strangers into spaces filled with memories. Before she can approve such a step, she must be certain the estate can do so without losing its soul. She walks the house alone in the evenings, moving slowly through the great rooms, letting the scale of each space speak for itself. The banquet hall still holds the lingering warmth of celebrations long past. The library retains its quiet, steady presence, the scent of old books resting around her as though the air itself remembers George's hours spent reading and writing. The music room carries the silence of paused melodies. Even the winter garden glows softly in the moonlight, each leaf reflecting a part of the estate's spirit. She realizes that opening these rooms to visitors will not diminish them. Instead, it may allow them to be appreciated more deeply, preserved more faithfully, and cared for more responsibly. As she walks the corridors, she recalls how George once believed that beauty should be shared, not hidden. He imagined the estate as a place where learning, artistry, and the natural world could come together harmoniously. Perhaps, she thinks, allowing the public into these rooms would honor that original vision. It would invite others to see what he had created, to understand the thought and discipline behind each detail. And in doing so, it might provide the support needed to safeguard the house for the generations still to come. The decision forms slowly, shaped by these reflections and the quiet rhythm of the house at night. One evening, she stops before the door leading to the winter garden. The plants are settled in darkness, yet their silhouettes remain distinct. She senses that this is the last moment before she crosses a threshold between the estate's past and its future. She places her hand on the doorframe, steady and sure. The silence around her seems to affirm what she already knows. It is time. When the announcement is finally made in 1930, it carries both surprise and inevitability. The estate will open certain rooms to the public for a modest admission. Visitors will be allowed to walk through the banquet hall, the library, the winter garden, and several of the ground floor rooms. They will see the grand scale of the architecture, the craftsmanship that shaped each inch of the limestone facade, and the interior details that represent the height of Gilded Age artistry. It is a decision rooted in practicality, yet also in respect for the estate's heritage. The community responds with curiosity. Newspapers mention the opening with restrained astonishment. Neighbors from Asheville speak of the decision with admiration and relief, hoping the new venture will help preserve the estate that has shaped the region's identity for decades. Across the country, readers reflect on what it means for such a grand house to open its doors during a time of national hardship. In a world marked by uncertainty, the estate offers something stable, a glimpse into craftsmanship, endurance, and history. The first visitors arrive quietly, walking up the familiar approach road that Frederick Law Olmsted designed decades earlier. They are not wealthy. They are families, students, travelers, and people interested in seeing a place they had only heard about in passing. They stand at the entrance and look up at the immense limestone facade. Many pause in silence, surprised by the scale of the house and the stillness that surrounds it. When they step inside the winter garden, the soft light filtering through the glass settles around them, just as it did for George and Edith. The sound of their footsteps becomes the new heartbeat of the estate, gentle and respectful, echoing through rooms that now serve both memory and purpose. The early days of public visitation bring a quiet sense of reassurance. For the first time, the estate generates a steady income that offsets its expenses. Though modest at first, the funds help support repairs, maintain the staff, and keep the estate functioning. Edith observes these developments with cautious optimism. She does not seek praise or recognition. Her goal is simple: to preserve what matters. She believes that if people experience the estate with care, they will feel its significance. Outside the house, life continues. Spring unfolds across the fields. Workers tend to the orchards and gardens. Foresters measure the growth of young trees. The mountains rise in the distance, unchanged and steady, as if watching over the estate with quiet approval. That sense of continuity becomes one of the estate's greatest strengths. Even as the world changes, the estate maintains its rhythm. Yet even with the success of the early public tours, new challenges loom. Economic instability continues across the nation. Travel remains limited for many. Edith understands that the estate cannot rely on a single source of income. She begins to consider additional adjustments, perhaps new ways to use the land or collaborate with national institutions. The estate has survived thus far through resilience, but she knows that the next chapter will demand the same level of care and courage that guided her through previous years. As she closes her eyes one evening in the winter garden, feeling the warmth of the lamps reflecting off the tiled floor, she wonders how the estate might serve a larger purpose. her thoughts drift toward the future, where new needs and new opportunities may arise. She has kept the house alive. Now she must ensure it continues to thrive. The faint hum of the winter garden lights becomes the final sound of the night, leading her gently toward the next decisions she will face. The faint hum of the winter garden lights lingers in the still air as morning arrives, carrying with it a subtle shift in the estate's rhythm. The soft glow that had guided Edith the night before recedes into the daylight, but its memory follows her as she steps away from the tiled floor and walks slowly toward the wide corridor that leads deeper into the house. The winter garden's gentle warmth gives way to the cool calm of the stone halls, and that quiet transition becomes the bridge into the estate's next chapter. She moves with steady purpose, knowing that although the estate has survived its first great transformation, new uncertainties rise on the horizon, shaped by the challenges of a changing nation. Throughout the early 1930s, economic hardship spreads across the country with growing force. Families struggle to find work, businesses close, and the optimism that once propelled American progress begins to falter. The estate, though sheltered in its mountain setting, feels the impact with unmistakable clarity. Visitor numbers fluctuate as travel becomes a luxury few can afford. Income from tours, though helpful, cannot keep pace with the fluctuating economy. The fields and forests continue to produce, but the market prices for agricultural goods fall dramatically. Once again, the balance between the estate's income and its needs begins to thin. Edith adapts with quiet determination. She reviews budgets in the early morning hours when the house is still, her desk lit by a single lamp. She works alongside the estate managers, discussing crop yields, timber schedules, and workforce adjustments with the same calm precision she once applied to hosting dignitaries and scholars. Every line in the account books tells a story about the estate's condition. Some stories are encouraging, others challenging, but all of them must be understood if the estate is to remain steady. Beyond financial matters, the broader question of stewardship weighs on her mind. The estate covers thousands of acres of forested land, rivers, gardens, and farmland. Its scale is a gift, but also a responsibility. Edith understands that decisions made now will shape the estate for decades, even generations to come. She meets with forestry experts to discuss long-term plans for sustainable harvesting. She consults agricultural specialists to identify new methods that may improve yields. She walks the fields herself, observing the condition of the soil, the health of the crops, and the morale of the workers. Meanwhile, the world outside is changing. Ideas about land conservation and public resources grow stronger in national conversations. Government programs emerge to stabilize the struggling economy. Forest management becomes both an environmental and economic priority. In this shifting landscape, the estate's vast wooded areas capture the attention of several national agencies, who see in them an opportunity for conservation and public use. The land is beautiful, expansive, and essential to the region's natural health, yet it is also a significant financial strain on the estate. During this time, a formal offer arrives from the federal government regarding a substantial portion of the estate's land. The idea is straightforward, yet monumental. The government wishes to purchase tens of thousands of acres of forest to establish part of what will become a national forest in the region. The proposal comes with fair compensation, offering the estate an influx of funds that could stabilize its finances and ensure the long-term preservation of the land under responsible care. Edith does not respond immediately. She sits quietly with the proposal for several days, reviewing maps that outline the areas in question. She marks the watersheds, the slopes, the newly restored forests, and the wildlife habitats that have slowly begun to recover under careful management. She recognizes the value these lands hold, not in profit, but in their role as living ecosystems shaped over decades. Parting with them feels difficult, yet she also understands the profound significance of placing them under permanent protection. She meets with her advisors and listens to their insights, each of them aware of how important this decision is. The estate's financial needs are real and pressing. The offer is fair and timely. She considers the possibility that these lands, once threatened by deforestation before George acquired them, could now become part of a national effort to preserve natural resources for generations. This aligns with George's original vision of responsible land stewardship, perhaps even more deeply than he could have imagined. In the quiet evening hours, she returns once more to the winter garden. Moonlight filters through the glass, casting soft reflections across the leaves. She sits for a long time, listening to the faint drip of water from the small fountain. It becomes clear that the estate's survival depends not on holding every acre, but on preserving its essence. The heart of the estate, the house, the gardens, the surrounding hills, will remain. By allowing the outer lands to pass into national care, she can secure the estate's future and honor the conservation ideals that guided George's forestry efforts. With calm conviction, she makes her decision. In 1932, she agrees to sell more than 80,000 acres to the federal government. The land becomes part of a growing national forest, protected and cared for in perpetuity. The sale provides critical financial stability during one of the nation's most difficult periods. It also ensures that the estate's legacy extends beyond its walls and gardens into the realm of public conservation. The transition is not easy for everyone. Workers who tended the farthest sections of the land must adapt to new responsibilities or find employment with the emerging national programs. Families living near the borders of the estate witness changes in ownership that affect daily life. Yet many recognize the wisdom in Edith's choice. The mountains, now safeguarded, will remain healthy and accessible. The land that once supported extraction now supports restoration. The estate changes physically, too. With the boundary lines redrawn, its remaining acreage becomes more concentrated around the core features: the house, the gardens, the farms, and the forests closest to the main ridge. This smaller footprint is not a loss, but a refinement. The estate becomes more manageable, more focused, more aligned with the realities of the modern world. As the years progress, signs of recovery appear. The income from tourism slowly increases as the national mood improves. The estate's operations become more efficient. Workers develop new routines suited to the smaller, more sustainable acreage. The forests surrounding the estate blend seamlessly into the newly formed national forest, creating a vast protected landscape where wildlife thrives. Then, a new challenge emerges, one that originates far beyond the estate's gates. As tensions rise abroad, the world once again moves toward conflict. By the early 1940s, global war reshapes every corner of life, even in the quiet mountains of North Carolina. The estate, with its sturdy construction and remote location, soon finds itself called upon in an unexpected way. This time, the winter garden's quiet glow will lead the estate into a chapter where preservation takes on a new meaning, one that resonates far beyond its walls. War does not arrive at the estate with noise or movement. It comes quietly, like a distant change in temperature, first sensed rather than seen. The same faint glow that rested over the winter garden in peaceful years now settles with a different weight, as though the glass itself understands that the world beyond the mountains has shifted. The soft light, once a symbol of serene continuity, becomes the threshold into a period when the estate will play an unexpected role, not as a private refuge and not merely as a house open to visitors, but as a silent guardian of treasures, far older and more fragile than itself. As the nation enters the Second World War, many of the country's most treasured cultural institutions must confront the possibility of danger. Cities along the East Coast are considered vulnerable to attack. Museums in Washington, New York, and Boston discreetly prepare contingency plans. Artworks that have survived centuries could be lost in minutes if catastrophe were to strike. Curators and government officials examine maps, searching for secure locations far from military targets and industrial centers. They need a place strong enough to protect entire collections, yet remote enough to avoid attention. It must be large, structurally sound, and overseen by people who understand the importance of preservation. In private conversations, the estate begins to appear on these lists. It is far from major cities, shielded by the Blue Ridge Mountains, and built with stone walls thick enough to withstand almost any threat. The music room in particular, with its solid construction and limited windows, offers an ideal environment for storing crates of art. Government representatives discreetly reach out, asking whether such a responsibility might be possible. The request carries enormous trust. It suggests that the estate is not only architecturally impressive, but historically reliable, an institution that can serve the country in a time of uncertainty. Edith receives the proposal with quiet consideration. She is older now, her movement slower, her hair turning white at the temples, yet her presence remains steady and authoritative. She understands the gravity of the request. The artworks in question include pieces central to the nation's cultural memory, paintings that once hung in European palaces before being acquired by American collectors, sculptures transported across continents, rare objects that scholars have studied for generations. To shelter them during wartime is to safeguard part of humanity's story. She walks alone through the corridors, moving toward the music room. The space has always been one of dignity, used for quiet gatherings, musical evenings, and moments of reflection. She steps inside, noticing the way the afternoon light falls across the polished floor. The room feels solid, secure, almost protective. She imagines the crates that would soon fill the space, wooden boxes labeled with names known across the world. She imagines the silence in which they would rest, undisturbed, safe. It becomes clear to her that the estate is capable of this service, and more than capable, it is suited for it, shaped for it, almost waiting for it. She agrees to the request. Arrangements are made quickly yet discreetly. Trucks carrying crates arrive under guarded conditions. Workers unload them with meticulous care, following lists prepared by curators who have entrusted these objects to the estate. The music room, once filled with gentle melodies, now becomes a sanctuary of silence. Protective coverings are placed over the windows. Environmental controls are adjusted. Security measures are strengthened. The house, which had endured shifting economies and decades of change, now becomes part of the nation's quiet defense. The presence of these artworks brings a new atmosphere to the estate. Workers speak softly when passing near the music room, aware of what lies inside. Visitors are limited. Only a few staff members know the full scope of what the estate is safeguarding. Edith checks on the room often, ensuring that the crates remain secure and that conditions remain stable. She does not treat the responsibility with grandeur or ceremony. Instead, she approaches it with the quiet diligence that has defined her stewardship for decades. Beyond the walls of the mansion, wartime adjustments shape daily life. Gasoline rationing reduces travel, decreasing the number of visitors. Many estate employees join the war effort, leaving gaps that must be filled by those who remain. The farms contribute food to regional supply efforts, yet must also maintain enough production to support the estate. The forests continue to be managed carefully, though timber operations adjust to wartime needs. Throughout these changes, the estate remains steady, its rhythm slowed but unbroken. The mountains themselves seem to stand even taller during these years, as though protecting the estate with their silence. Snow settles on their peaks in winter, creating a sense of isolation that becomes oddly comforting. In spring, the new leaves appear with their usual softness, indifferent to the distant conflict. Wildlife continues to move through the forests, following ancient patterns, undisturbed by human worries. The landscape remains calm, even as the world beyond experiences turmoil. Inside the house, Edith works tirelessly. She ensures that the staff is cared for, that essential supplies are secured, and that the estate's operations continue despite shortages. She walks the terraces in the evenings, reflecting on how far the estate has come, through personal loss, economic upheaval, and now global war. She considers how each challenge has reshaped the estate, requiring new strength at every turn. And she recognizes that the responsibility entrusted to the estate during the war is not an interruption of its story, but a continuation of its purpose: to preserve, to protect, and to endure. The artwork remains at the estate for several years, hidden safely behind stone walls. When the war finally ends and the pieces are returned to their institutions, the music room feels larger in their absence, almost echoing with the sense of quiet duty that defined those years. Edith watches the crates leave the estate with the same calm dignity she showed when they arrived. She does not speak publicly about the role the estate played. She does not seek recognition. She simply returns to her daily responsibilities, continuing the stewardship that has carried the estate through every trial. Yet the estate has changed once again. The experience of sheltering the nation's art has woven the house into a broader chapter of American history. It has shown that even in times of darkness, a place built for beauty can serve as a refuge. And it has reminded everyone involved that preservation is not only about maintaining structures, but about protecting meaning. As Edith walks back to the winter garden, she feels a renewed sense of purpose. The soft light filtering through the glass reflects in the leaves once more, gentle and warm. The war has ended, but new challenges are approaching. Economic pressures, shifting social expectations, and the complexities of guiding the estate into a modern era. The question now becomes how the estate will continue to adapt and who will carry its responsibilities into the next generation. The answer begins to form slowly, just as the light settles across the winter garden once again. The soft reflections in the winter garden linger as Edith steps away, leaving behind the faint shimmer of glass and greenery. That quiet glow, which had accompanied her through decisions of war and duty, now trails her into the long corridor that leads toward her private rooms. The sound of her footsteps merges with the steady hum of the house's systems, still operating with disciplined rhythm despite the world's many changes. The estate has weathered conflict and uncertainty, but peace brings its own complexities. As Edith moves through the hall, the polished floors and gentle light offer no hint of the challenges that will soon take shape. This moment, subtle and transitional, is where the estate enters a new era, one defined not by war or immediate crises, but by the slow pressure of time itself. When the war ends, a wave of relief spreads across the country. Soldiers return home, families reunite, cities shift from wartime austerity to renewed growth. Yet the landscape of American life has changed, and the estate feels these changes with a clarity that cannot be ignored. Travel resumes, bringing a modest increase in visitors, but the economic and cultural environment is no longer the one George Vanderbilt knew. The Gilded Age ideals that shaped the estate have faded into memory, replaced by modern expectations and new rhythms of daily life. Edith, now well into her later years, observes these transformations with thoughtful calm. She understands that the world her husband inhabited has vanished, and with it the social structures that once made large estates possible. Families with wealth now choose to live in cities or modest country homes rather than maintain sprawling properties with extensive staffs. Even the most prosperous Americans embrace efficiency over grandeur, yet the estate cannot follow this trend. Its identity, its reason for existing, is rooted in scale, craftsmanship, and beauty. It must find a way to remain relevant without betraying its essence. Edith acknowledges the limits of what she can personally oversee. Her energy, though still admirable, is not infinite. She delegates more responsibilities to trusted staff, focusing her attention on the most critical decisions. She continues to live in the house, moving through familiar rooms with steady grace, but she increasingly considers the estate's future beyond her own lifetime. The years ahead will require leadership, vision, and adaptability, qualities she hopes the next generation will embrace. Her daughter, Cornelia, is no longer the young girl who once explored the hallways on quiet afternoons. She has grown into adulthood, married, and become a mother herself. But Cornelia's relationship with the estate is complex. Raised within its walls, yet longing for independence, she feels both affection and burden in equal measure. The expectations placed upon her as the heiress of such an immense property often conflict with her own aspirations. As the world shifts toward modernity, the responsibilities of maintaining the estate feel increasingly daunting. Cornelia's life undergoes significant changes during these post-war years. Her first marriage ends, and she chooses to pursue a path that leads her far from the house of her childhood. She spends periods living abroad, traveling widely, seeking to define her life on her own terms. The estate remains part of her identity, but not the center of it. Her absence leaves a vacuum in the estate's generational continuity, raising questions about who will assume stewardship when Edith can no longer do so. Meanwhile, Edith continues to make practical improvements to keep the estate stable. She strengthens relationships with regional organizations, exploring opportunities for collaboration. She monitors tourism carefully, noting patterns in visitor numbers and adjusting operations accordingly. She invests in essential repairs, ensuring that the structure remains sound. She walks the gardens and terraces with the calm authority of someone who understands that preservation is not a single act, but a daily commitment repeated over decades. Yet for all her efforts, the estate still faces financial challenges that grow more pronounced with each passing year. Property taxes increase. Staff wages must rise to match modern standards. Infrastructure, pipes, mechanical systems, and heating, ages in ways that require constant attention. The house, intricate and magnificent, is a living organism that demands care at every turn. In the early 1950s, whispers of concern begin to circulate among advisors and family members. Some question whether the estate can remain under private ownership indefinitely. Others suggest that perhaps it should be donated to the state or transferred to a preservation society. These are not easy conversations. The estate is not simply a property. It is a legacy, an embodiment of George's vision and Edith's decades of stewardship. Yet the practical realities cannot be dismissed. Edith listens quietly to these discussions. She weighs the possibilities carefully, considering their impact not just on the house, but on the land, the workers, and the surrounding community. The estate is woven into the identity of the region. Its presence supports jobs, tourism, and local pride. Any decision she makes will reach far beyond the walls of the house itself. She reflects often in her final years in the same winter garden where she made so many pivotal decisions. The plants still thrive beneath the glass, their leaves stretching toward the filtered light. Seasonal flowers continue to bloom in quiet succession, marking the passage of time with delicate precision. The soft trickle of the fountain remains unchanged. In this space, Edith finds clarity. She resolves that the estate must remain in the family if at all possible. She believes that George built it not only for beauty, but for continuity. She holds firm to the belief that the family's stewardship lends the house a spirit that cannot be replicated by institutions or committees. She cannot guarantee what future generations will choose, but she hopes her example will guide them. In 1958, at the age of 92, Edith passes away at the estate she spent nearly half a century protecting. Her death marks the end of an era defined by resilience, adaptability, and unwavering commitment. The house falls silent for several days, as though absorbing the change. Staff members, many of whom spent decades under her care, feel the loss deeply. The community around the estate honors her legacy with quiet respect. With her passing, the estate enters another period of uncertainty. The responsibility shifts to her grandson, William A. Cecil, a man with a sharp mind, steady temperament, and deep understanding of the estate's significance. He steps into leadership aware of the immense task before him. The world is modernizing at a rapid pace. Tourism is evolving. Expectations for historic preservation are changing. The estate must adapt once again, and this time the stakes are even higher. The quiet glow of the winter garden once more becomes the symbolic bridge between the stewardship that has ended and the stewardship that now begins. As William walks through the house, feeling the weight of its history beneath each step, he carries with him the memory of his grandmother's determination. And with that memory guiding him, he prepares to lead the estate toward its next transformation, one that will determine whether it can continue into the 21st century as a living legacy. The echo of William's footsteps spreads softly through the corridor as he moves away from the winter garden, the same place where his grandmother once gathered her strength for decisions that shaped the estate's survival. The gentle light behind him fades as he turns a corner, stepping fully into the responsibilities he has inherited. The air feels different now, lighter in some ways but weighted in others by the knowledge that he stands at the beginning of a long journey. This quiet motion from one space to the next marks the estate's entry into a new phase, one defined by business acumen, strategic adaptation, and a renewed understanding of what it means to preserve history in a rapidly changing world. When William assumes leadership in the late 1950s, the estate is at a crossroads. The world outside the mountains has transformed dramatically since George Vanderbilt first walked these halls, and even since Edith's passing. America is experiencing unprecedented growth. Suburbs expand, highways stretch across the country, families travel more freely, and tourism takes on forms that previous generations could not have imagined. At the same time, historic estates across the nation continue to vanish, unable to withstand the combined pressures of maintenance costs, taxation, and evolving cultural preferences. It becomes clear to William that the estate cannot remain a static relic of the past if it wishes to endure. It must find new ways to serve the present while honoring the legacy of those who came before. He begins by studying everything: financial statements, visitor data, maintenance reports, agricultural yields, and historical records. He consults with experts in preservation, hospitality, and business. He walks the grounds for hours each day, observing the condition of the gardens, the farms, and the forests. He meets with workers to understand their routines and challenges. Through this immersion, William begins to form a vision. The estate must evolve from a singular historic attraction into a dynamic destination with multiple sources of revenue. Only then can it generate the consistent support required to maintain the house and grounds at the level they deserve. One of his earliest realizations is that tourists are no longer satisfied with brief, daytime visits alone. Travelers increasingly seek immersive experiences, places where they can stay overnight, enjoy meals, explore landscapes, and engage deeply with history. The estate already possesses extraordinary natural beauty, architectural grandeur, and cultural significance. It simply needs to develop ways for visitors to experience these qualities more fully. William identifies the winery as the first major addition that could expand the estate's appeal. The property has fertile land, suitable climate conditions, and a long agricultural tradition. Establishing a winery would not only diversify the estate's income, but also align naturally with the region's increasing interest in local foods and artisanal products. He assembles a team of experts, travels extensively to learn from established wine regions, and carefully plans vineyards that will thrive in the local soil. Over time, the winery becomes one of the estate's signature attractions, drawing visitors who might never have traveled solely to tour the house. Once the winery proves successful, William pursues the next step: hospitality. The idea of building an inn or hotel on the grounds is a significant departure from tradition. For decades, the estate has welcomed visitors for tours, but not for lodging. Yet William understands that offering overnight accommodations will encourage guests to spend more time exploring the property. An inn must be designed with care, luxurious but not ostentatious, modern yet respectful of the estate's historical character. Planning takes years, but when the inn finally opens, it becomes a cornerstone of the estate's long-term stability. Visitors now linger for days rather than hours, creating a deeper connection with the land and contributing more directly to the estate's operations. While these new ventures grow, William continues to refine the estate's tourism practices. He enhances guest services, expands guided tour offerings, introduces seasonal events, and ensures that the house itself remains the central attraction. During Christmas, the estate becomes a celebrated destination, with decorations inspired by the earliest holiday traditions hosted by George and Edith. In spring, the gardens attract thousands, eager to witness the seasonal blooms. Summer brings concerts and outdoor activities. Autumn transforms the forests into a tapestry of color, drawing visitors seeking quiet reflection in the mountains. Through careful planning, each season becomes a distinct chapter in the estate's annual rhythm. Yet William never loses sight of preservation. He invests in structural repairs, climate control systems, and fire suppression technologies. He ensures that experts maintain the artwork, tapestries, and furnishings with the highest standards. He restores neglected areas of the house and revives original design elements that had faded over time. He also strengthens the estate's forestry program, recognizing the importance of maintaining the surrounding landscape not only for aesthetic appeal, but for environmental health. Throughout these efforts, he carries forward the values first established by George and fiercely protected by Edith. Despite the progress, challenges persist. Economic recessions affect travel. Rising labor and material costs strain budgets. Weather events occasionally damage gardens and structures. Estate taxes continue to demand careful planning across generations. Yet William approaches each difficulty with the same steady resolve that characterized his grandmother's leadership. He recognizes that resilience is built through consistent effort, not through any single achievement. In the midst of these developments, another question arises. How can the estate ensure its future beyond even William's lifetime? He considers this deeply, knowing that the next transition must be handled thoughtfully to maintain the estate's continuity. He encourages his children to participate gradually in the estate's operations, allowing them to learn its complexities firsthand. He hopes that by experiencing the estate's beauty and challenges, they will feel compelled to continue its stewardship. During this period, the estate attracts national attention. Newspapers publish features about its unique survival. Historians and preservationists praise its commitment to maintaining historical integrity while adapting to modern needs. Visitors speak with admiration about the experience of walking through the great rooms or gazing across the rolling hills. The estate quietly becomes a symbol of what can be accomplished when history is preserved, not as a frozen artifact, but as a living legacy, shaped with care and foresight. One evening, William finds himself in the winter garden, a place he rarely visits without recalling his grandmother's steady presence. The glass ceiling glows softly as the last colors of sunset reflect across its surface. The plants breathe gently in the cooling air. He pauses in the center of the room, absorbing the atmosphere that has witnessed the estate's most pivotal decisions. In this stillness, he reflects on the decades ahead. The estate has survived fire, financial strain, war, and social change. It has adapted without losing its identity. Now it stands ready for a future shaped by creativity and commitment. As he steps out of the winter garden, he hears the faint murmur of evening guests gathering after a day of exploring the grounds. Their quiet conversations drift through the air like echoes of appreciation. The estate is no longer merely a house in the mountains. It is a place where history breathes, where visitors find connection, and where the past continues to guide the present. The light fades completely, and the estate settles into night, a night that leads gently into the next chapter, where new generations will take their place in its long story. The night settles over the estate with a calm that seems to steady everything it touches. William pauses on one of the upper terraces, listening to the quiet hum of cicadas rising from the fields below. The lights inside the house glow softly through the tall windows, their warm reflections drifting across the stone balustrades like faint lanterns guiding the estate into its next day. This stillness, arriving just after the soft murmur of guests and just before the deeper silence of midnight, becomes the subtle bridge into the estate's continuing evolution. It is in this quiet hour that the estate reveals how far it has come, and how much farther it must go as new demands, expectations, and opportunities approach with every passing year. By the 1970s, the cultural landscape of the country shifts again in ways few could have predicted. Americans begin rediscovering history with fresh enthusiasm. Television documentaries draw millions. Historical societies grow rapidly. Families travel long distances to visit significant places from the nation's past. Heritage tourism becomes a recognizable movement, driven by a desire to understand the origins of modern life through architecture, landscapes, and stories. This renewed interest creates a fertile environment for the estate, which emerges as one of the most compelling destinations in the region. Visitors respond not only to the scale and beauty of the house, but to the atmosphere of authenticity that surrounds it. William recognizes this moment as a turning point. He understands that people no longer come merely to see a grand house. They come to feel the passage of time, to witness craftsmanship rarely preserved at such a scale, and to experience a glimpse of American history told through the lives of the people who built and cared for this place. To meet this growing interest, he commits to expanding the interpretive programs that guide visitors through the estate. New exhibits are developed, drawing from extensive archival materials. Historical photographs are restored and displayed. Rooms once closed to the public are reopened, carefully furnished according to original plans and documents. The estate begins to offer insights into not only the Vanderbilt family, but also the hundreds of workers, from butlers to blacksmiths, whose labor made the estate function. At the same time, William recognizes the importance of preserving the estate's environment. He expands the forestry program pioneered by George, ensuring that the land remains a model of sustainable practices. Trails are maintained, erosion is monitored, and wildlife habitats receive careful attention. The estate's rural character becomes a defining feature, offering visitors a sense of peace often lost in modern life. The surrounding forests, fields, and riverfront areas create an immersive experience that complements the historical narrative within the house. Together, they form a landscape where history and nature coexist in seamless harmony. Even as the estate grows in popularity, the demands of preservation intensify. The house requires ongoing structural reinforcement. Stonework must be repaired. Roof tiles need regular replacement. Mechanical systems installed decades earlier reach the end of their lifespan. Each project is significant, requiring expertise, planning, and considerable resources. William approaches these challenges with a steady hand, seeking solutions that balance historical accuracy with long-term sustainability. He recruits skilled preservationists, architects, and historians to ensure that each restoration respects the original vision while meeting modern safety standards. In addition to these efforts, William continues to expand the guest experience. He supports the development of new restaurants that serve regional cuisine inspired by the estate's agricultural traditions. He invests in retail spaces that sell locally crafted goods, books, and estate-produced wines. Seasonal festivals and educational programs become hallmarks of the estate, drawing families, school groups, and travelers from across the country. Throughout each expansion, he maintains a clear focus. The estate must remain authentic, never overly commercialized, always grounded in its history and landscape. As the 1980s unfold, society undergoes another shift. Americans increasingly seek destinations that offer not only beauty and history, but also emotional resonance, a sense of connection to the past and to their own memories. The estate becomes a place where families return year after year, passing their experiences across generations. Many visitors come to celebrate special occasions, to walk the gardens in spring, or to see the Christmas decorations that fill the house with warmth and light. The estate becomes part of their stories, intertwined with family milestones and personal journeys. During this period, William also turns his attention to the estate's agricultural heritage. He strengthens the farm operations, emphasizing sustainable methods and regional food culture. Dairy, produce, and livestock operations are refined, and partnerships with local producers begin to flourish. These efforts support both the estate's internal needs and its public-facing programs, offering visitors a deeper understanding of how land and food shaped the estate's history. The farm becomes an essential part of the estate's identity, bridging past and present through practices rooted in tradition yet guided by modern knowledge. As the estate's offerings grow, so does its national significance. Travel magazines highlight it as a premier destination. Preservation organizations praise its commitment to maintaining one of the largest privately owned historic homes in the country. Scholars visit to study its architecture, forestry program, and social history. The estate quietly becomes an example of what long-term, family-led stewardship can achieve. It demonstrates that preservation is not a single act, but an evolving responsibility that must adapt to changing times without compromising its core values. Yet even in these years of growth, William remains aware of the challenges ahead. Estate taxes continue to shape long-term planning. Economic fluctuations affect tourism. Aging infrastructure requires constant investment. He prepares carefully for future transitions, knowing that each generation must embrace the estate with the same dedication shown by those who came before. He works closely with his children, ensuring they understand both the opportunities and responsibilities that lie ahead. He hopes they will feel the same quiet calling that has guided him since he first stepped into leadership. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning sessions, William returns to the winter garden. The familiar scent of the plants mingles with the cool evening air drifting through the slightly opened doors. The light is dim, filtered through the glass in soft patterns that reflect across the stone floor. He stands still for a moment, feeling the weight of years resting gently around him. The estate is strong, thriving, and ready for what comes next. Yet he also senses that change is approaching, shaped not by crisis, but by the natural passing of time. As he leaves the winter garden, the fading light follows him into the corridor, stretching out like a quiet reminder that every chapter of the estate's history leads naturally into the next. The estate has grown, endured, adapted, and welcomed millions. Now it moves toward a future where new leadership, new ideas, and new challenges will emerge, each calling for the same steadiness that has carried the house through more than a century of change. The night deepens, the mountains fall silent, and the estate breathes calmly in the darkness, waiting for the next footsteps to guide its path. The mountains remain still through the deepening night, standing guard as they have for generations. But near dawn, a subtle change begins to move through the estate. A pale ribbon of light stretches across the eastern horizon, tracing the silhouette of the hills with quiet insistence. This first touch of morning settles over the rooftops and gardens, over the vineyards that now thrive on gentle slopes, and finally over the great house itself, resting against the stone as though acknowledging the passage of time. It is within this soft transition from darkness into the first muted light that the estate prepares to meet a new era, shaped by leadership that carries the weight of legacy forward, while steadily expanding the estate's meaning in the modern world. By the late 20th century, William's careful planning has created a stable foundation for the estate. Visitors arrive throughout the seasons, drawn by the gardens, the historic tours, the winery, the festivals, and the sense of completeness that only a place this carefully preserved can offer. Yet the estate does not stand still. With each passing year, new projects form, new challenges emerge, and the need for expanded infrastructure becomes clear. The estate's rising popularity requires more paths, more parking, more transportation, and more programming. It must serve guests while continuing to protect the landscape, a delicate balance that demands thoughtful, disciplined leadership. William approaches this period with the same steady temperament that guided him through earlier decades. But now, his children begin to play significant roles in the estate's evolution, taking on responsibilities that ensure the family's continued stewardship. His son, William A. V. Cecil, Jr., and daughter, Diana Steele, step forward gradually, each bringing perspective shaped by both heritage and contemporary insight. They understand that the estate's survival depends on honoring its past while innovating for its future. During this time, the estate refines its guest experience with greater precision. New tours highlight areas of the house previously unexplored, such as behind-the-scenes servant spaces, architectural elements, and stories drawn from detailed, archival research. These efforts deepen the public's understanding of how the estate functioned as a self-sustaining world, where artisans, house staff, gardeners, and foresters all contributed to the daily rhythm. Visitors begin to appreciate the estate not only as a symbol of wealth, but as a living community that represented one of the most ambitious domestic projects in American history. At the same time, the estate strengthens its preservation efforts. Conservators work on restoring original textiles, repairing water damage, stabilizing wallpaper, and preserving intricate woodwork. Specialists clean paintings and tapestries, revealing details hidden beneath decades of dust. Climate controls are updated to protect fragile artifacts. Even the smallest objects are cataloged with meticulous care, ensuring that each piece remains part of the estate's evolving story. Beyond the walls of the house, the estate broadens its agricultural ventures. The farm continues to supply the estate's restaurants with fresh dairy, produce, and meats. New greenhouses support floral displays throughout the year. Sustainable farming practices, crop rotation, soil preservation, and careful water management are prioritized to maintain the long-term health of the land. Each of these efforts reflects the estate's original intent, to be a place where beauty and responsibility coexist. One of the most significant developments during this era is the long-term expansion of guest accommodations. The inn proves remarkably successful, offering visitors a refined yet comfortable experience that complements their exploration of the estate. Encouraged by this response, the estate considers additional lodging options that can provide varied experiences while maintaining the estate's character. These plans unfold gradually, shaped by years of study, community engagement, and environmental review. The goal is not to build widely, but to build thoughtfully, creating spaces that serve guests without overwhelming the natural and historical landscape. As these expansions take shape, the estate increasingly becomes part of the cultural identity of the region. Local residents view it as both a landmark and a partner, supporting employment, tourism, and regional development. Schools visit for educational programs, learning about architecture, science, horticulture, forestry, and history. Researchers draw upon the estate's archives to study the Gilded Age, sustainable land management, and early American conservation practices. The estate grows from a private residence into a multifaceted institution that supports learning and cultural preservation. Yet with this growth comes new pressures. Infrastructure must be maintained at a scale that few organizations ever confront. Roads, bridges, water systems, and public facilities require constant attention. Weather events threaten gardens and forests, demanding swift responses from grounds crews. The house itself, more than a century old, requires increasing structural care. Every year brings new projects: roof stabilization, stone repointing, electrical modernization, and other essential work that ensures the estate remains safe and accessible. Through these challenges, the family remains central to the estate's governance. Decisions are made with the understanding that preservation is not a short-term endeavor, but a lifelong commitment. The estate cannot simply react to circumstances. It must anticipate them, planning decades into the future. This long view becomes a defining characteristic of the estate's survival, a perspective that few institutions manage to uphold across generations. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the estate also becomes a cultural symbol featured in films, books, and documentaries. Audiences across the world recognize its facade, its landscapes, and its grand rooms. Yet these appearances, while bringing attention, do not define the estate. Its identity continues to be shaped by a deep respect for authenticity, by the quiet work of preservation, and by the steady presence of those who guide its operations with humility and care. As the century turns, William observes these developments with a mixture of pride and reflection. He understands that he has guided the estate through one of the most transformative periods in its history. The house stands strong, the land remains vibrant, and the estate has become a model of private preservation on a national scale. He continues to participate in decisions, offering insight drawn from decades of experience, but he also steps back gradually, allowing the next generation to carry the legacy forward. On a cool evening near the end of his stewardship, William visits the winter garden once more. The glass reflects the soft glow of the estate's lights, just as it did when he first took on the responsibility so many years earlier. The plants rustle faintly in the gentle breeze that drifts through the room. He stands still, absorbing the sense of continuity and calm that has always defined this space. The estate is ready for a new chapter, guided by hands shaped by both heritage and modern knowledge. As he walks out of the winter garden, the quiet footsteps that carry him across the stone floor fade slowly behind him, merging into the deepening silence of the evening. The estate breathes steadily, its lights soft, its future waiting just beyond the next horizon, ready for a generation that will face challenges unknown to the past, yet follow the same enduring commitment to care and preservation. And with that lingering calm, the estate moves into the next moment of its story, carried by the steady light of morning now rising behind the mountains. The first light of morning strengthens, moving slowly across the distant ridgelines until it reaches the uppermost chimneys of the great house. It glides downward, settling on stone carvings, window mullions, and slate tiles still cool from the night air. As the estate awakens beneath this gentle sweep of brightness, the world feels momentarily suspended, caught between the reverence of the past and the quiet promise of the day ahead. In this tender shift, where yesterday's shadows retreat and today's clarity takes form, the estate prepares to enter a new century, guided now by hands shaped not only by inheritance, but by a deep understanding of what it truly means to preserve a living legacy. When William steps back from daily management, the estate does not lose momentum. Instead, it moves into an era defined by renewed energy and expanded vision. His children, having grown up with the estate's rhythms woven into their daily lives, now carry its story forward with thoughtful balance. They understand that the estate's survival depends on respecting its origins while continuing to adapt to the needs of a modern, global audience. They also understand that the estate must remain more than a destination. It must remain a symbol of continuity, of careful stewardship, and of the quiet values that shaped its foundations more than a century earlier. One of the earliest initiatives of this new era focuses on clarity of purpose. The estate is vast and complex, with operations spanning hospitality, agriculture, preservation, conservation, retail, and guest services. To sustain this breadth, the leadership develops long-term strategies that strengthen each area, while ensuring that every decision aligns with the estate's essence. These strategies look decades ahead, reinforcing the idea that the estate must always plan for a future it may never see fully realized. This long perspective, inherited from both George and Edith, becomes the guiding principle for everything to come. As the 21st century begins, the estate experiences a significant rise in visitation. More travelers seek meaningful experiences, preferring places where they can slow down, reconnect with nature, and learn from the past. The estate answers this desire with gentle certainty. It enhances walking paths, expands outdoor programs, and deepens its interpretive offerings. Workshops on horticulture, mindfulness walks through the gardens, behind-the-scenes preservation tours, and exhibits on craftsmanship offer visitors new ways to understand the estate's depth. At the same time, the estate embraces sustainability with heightened focus. Environmental changes across the world highlight the need for careful resource management, and the estate responds with renewed commitment. Solar infrastructure is quietly introduced in select operational areas. Water conservation systems are expanded. Waste reduction becomes a central priority. The estate's forestry program, once considered innovative in George Vanderbilt's time, is now regarded as a model for regenerative land management. Young trees planted decades earlier now stand tall, blending with older forests to form a landscape that benefits wildlife, soil health, and regional biodiversity. In the agricultural fields, sustainable farming continues to evolve. Rotational grazing, organic cultivation, and responsible soil management support both the estate's restaurants and its educational programs. Guests who dine on estate-grown meals experience firsthand the connection between land, history, and cuisine. This integration strengthens the estate's identity as a place where the past informs the present and where the natural world is treated as a partner rather than a resource. The estate's cultural programming also expands. Seasonal exhibitions explore topics such as early American design, conservation history, and the daily life of estate workers. Partnerships with museums and historical institutions allow rare artifacts to be displayed in the context of the estate's architecture. These programs enrich the visitor experience while reinforcing the estate's educational mission. They also remind guests that history is not static. It is continually shaped by those who preserve it. As the estate modernizes, technology quietly enhances its operations. Digital systems help protect artifacts, monitor structural conditions, and support garden planning. Yet the leadership remains careful not to let technology disrupt the estate's atmosphere. Innovation is welcomed only when it strengthens preservation, enriches guest understanding, or protects the land. The estate maintains its serene character, encouraging visitors to unplug from the noise of modern life and immerse themselves fully in the experience of place. Throughout this period, the estate's hospitality offerings continue to grow. A second hotel opens, designed to complement the landscape with understated elegance. Surrounded by meadows and forests, it provides guests with a retreat that emphasizes comfort, warmth, and connection to the natural world. Meanwhile, the original inn remains a beloved destination, offering panoramic views of the mountains and a sense of timeless calm. Together, these accommodations support guests who wish to spend several days exploring the estate, discovering the slower rhythms that define its character. Special events also become part of the estate's seasonal traditions. Floral festivals celebrate the arrival of spring, filling the gardens with vibrant color. Summer evenings bring concerts and gentle gatherings on the lawns. Autumn offers quiet walks through forests painted with gold and crimson. And winter, perhaps the most cherished season of all, transforms the house into a warm sanctuary filled with candlelight, evergreen garlands, and traditions that echo the celebrations hosted by George and Edith more than a century earlier. During these years of expansion, the estate also confronts the ongoing realities of preservation. The house remains a vast responsibility, requiring constant care. Every inch of stone, every beam, every painted surface must be monitored, cleaned, repaired, and safeguarded. The leadership invests heavily in preservation projects, understanding that neglect, however small, can place the entire structure at risk. Teams of specialists work year-round, addressing everything from roof integrity to elaborate woodwork, from historic upholstery to delicate wallpapers. Their work, though often unnoticed by casual visitors, ensures that the estate remains whole. As the estate grows into an internationally recognized destination, its identity continues to rest on one quiet truth. It is still a family home, not in the sense of daily residence, but in the sense of stewardship. Each generation has added its imprint, its patience, its resolve. The leadership understands that families are bound not only by inheritance, but by responsibility, by the willingness to care for something larger than themselves. This sense of purpose continues to guide the estate's decisions, shaping its future with the same steady dedication that anchored its past. One evening, as twilight deepens across the gardens, William's children walk through the winter garden, the place where decisions seem to settle into clarity. The leaves glow softly beneath the overhead lights. A faint breeze moves through the space, carrying the scent of soil and greenery. They pause, much as William and Edith once paused, aware that they stand within a continuum that stretches across generations. The estate has endured because each caretaker found the courage to adapt without abandoning its soul. Now they accept their place within that lineage, ready to guide the estate into decades still unfolding. Outside, the last light fades behind the ridgelines. The house settles into the calm of evening, its windows glowing softly against the darkening sky. The estate stands as it always has, steady, patient, and quietly rooted in the belief that beauty, when tended with care, can outlast the shifting tides of time. And so the story continues, carried forward by those who listen to the land, honor the past, and prepare the estate for a future that will require both vision and reverence.